Chapter 2543. Death upon contact. Wu Fengtao suddenly spoke, causing Xiang Qingshan to be unable to help but be stunned, and he turned around to look at Wu Fengtao before asking, "Brother Wu, do you have anything to say?" Face grim, Wu Fengtao said, "Brother Zhu, this is no small matter. We need to report this to Sect Lord Hundred Rivers. If we kill Nye Tian now, it would be too impulsive. How about this? We lock up Nye Tian for now, then inform the Sect Lords of the two sections. We'll leave the final decision to the Sect Lords. What do you say?" With that, Wu Fengtao looked over at Zhu Hong, as if he were asking for his opinion. "No way." Zhu Hong rejected coldly, saying fiercely, "This brat must die immediately." Wu Fengtao furrowed his brows, and his expression sank. "Brother Zhu, isn't your request a bit too much? The way I see it, Zhu Jinbei was the one who started this whole thing. Even if Nye Tian killed someone, he doesn't deserve death." "What?" Zhu Hong's face darkened. "What do you mean by that, Wu Fengtao?" He said cold. "Don't tell me you're covering up for this brat?" Never could he have guessed that Wu Fengtao would dare to speak to him in such a harsh tone. It was a test of his bottom line. "I'm not covering up." Frowning, Wu Fengtao said, "It's just that it's very clear what's right and wrong. Even if Nye Tian killed Zhu Jinbei, he doesn't deserve death." "Impudent." Zhu Hong's pupils constricted. "Don't tell me that in your eyes, a direct descendant of the Zhu clan of Hundred Rivers isn't as good as a piece of trash in the late Paramount God level?" Eyes flashing, Wu Fengtao said cold, "If Nye Tian is a piece of trash, then Zhu Jinbei, who was killed by him, is worse than trash." Clearly, Zhu Hong had no idea how terrifying Nye Tian's battle prowess was. In fact, he was wondering how Nye Tian had managed to kill Zhu Jinbei. Zhu Hong's face darkened, and he was momentarily speechless. However, in the next moment, his expression turned cold and he roared, "Since the people of the 10,000 Mountain Sect aren't willing to fight, then the people of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect will do it ourselves. Zhu Jipeng, go and kill this brat." Zhu Hong growled. His killing intent was heavy. "Yes." Behind him, a cultivator appeared. Without any hesitation, he took a step forward and pounced on Nye Tian. The others were stunned. They didn't expect Zhu Jipeng to be so ferocious as to directly attack Nye Tian. Xiang Qingshan and Chang Kuan did not stop him, and Wu Fengtao did not stop him either. Zhu Jipeng wasn't weak, but compared to Nye Tian, he was trash. "Die!" Hovering in midair, Zhu Jipeng let out a fierce roar as he swung his saber down madly. His overwhelming saber intent morphed into a mountain-like saber shadow that slammed down towards Nye Tian. "You overestimate yourself." Seeing this, Nye Tian let out a low roar. His eyes were filled with cold disdain, and sword intent surged out of his body. Instantly, heaven and earth shook, and a powerful sword aura soared into the sky, sweeping out in all directions, making him look like a giant sword. From Xiang Qingshan's attitude towards Zhu Hong, Nye Tian could already tell how weak the 10,000 Mountain Sect was compared to the 100 Rivers Divine Sect. Because of this, Nye Tian wanted to prove that the 10,000 Mountain Sect was not weak. Zhu Hong sensed Nye Tian's sword aura from the battle ring. His expression changed, and he was shocked. "Oh no!" Zhu Jipeng, who was in midair, sensed the terrifying sword aura. His eyes flickered, and he screamed at his heart. Sadly, it was too late. Godly sword. In the next second, Nye Tian growled, and the sword image roared out like a dragon. Bang! Before the saber shadow in the air could touch the sword shadow, it was shattered by the violent sword force. Bam! A muffled sound rang out as Zhu Jipeng's body was engulfed by the sword image, and he died without a corpse. My heavens! How could Nye Tian be so strong? Everyone's eyes widened, and they cried out in shock. By this time, all of the cultivators in the arena had gathered around, and the battles on the other stages had stopped. Many of the people present knew Nye Tian's name, but they had never seen him fight before. Therefore, they were all shocked to the core. How is this possible? Zhu Hong's lips trembled as he stood on the stage, an unsightly expression on his face. Zhu Jiping was a peak paramount god. How could he be so weak in front of a late-stage paramount god like Nietian? Zhu Jiping wasn't the only one who was shocked. The people behind him were even more shocked. The expression of the thousand-cloud divine sex elder Ji Dian sank. He was quite shocked. The battle prowess Nietian was displaying far exceeded their understanding of a late-stage paramount god. What do you think? At this moment, Nietian smiled faintly as he looked at Zhu Hong from afar and asked, "My strength is not bad, right?" His voice was very calm, but at this moment, when it fell into Zhu Hong's ears, it was very unpleasant to hear. "Bastard!" The corner of Zhu Hong's eye twitched, and he roared, "Zhu Fei, Zhu Pao, attack together and kill this kid." "Yes, sir." Behind him, two other martial artists stepped forward. Their figures blurred into motion at the same time, turning into two raging tornadoes that swept towards Nietian. They were wind-type cultivators, and they moved with incredible speed, so fast that they couldn't even blink. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, two raging tornadoes appeared in the void, giving rise to deafening rumbles. Like two ferocious birds of prey, they swooped down towards Nietian. Their brutal auras spread out in all directions, covering an area of tens of thousands of meters. These two cultivators were obviously cruel and bloodthirsty people. The evil aura on their bodies was very heavy, and even the hurricane contained a fierce aura. How terrifying! The crowd felt the violent aura in the void, and their expressions changed abruptly. They were terrified. Two ghosts of heaven and earth reverse kill. However, Nietian didn't move in the slightest. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly as he unleashed his sword intent and star power, forming a mighty sword shadow that shot out in a frenzy. Rumble! Rumble! Then, in midair, two violent hurricanes collided with the sword shadow. After two explosions, the hurricanes were engulfed by the sword shadow. Zhu Fei and Zhu Pao also disappeared into the sword shadow. They didn't even have time to scream before they died. Everyone's eyes widened as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Shock filled their eyes as they looked at Nietian. Zhu Fei and Zhu Pao together were obviously much stronger than Zhu Jiping. But even so, they died at the hands of Nietian. Humph! While everyone was still in a daze, Nietianling sneered, looked at Zhu Hong again, and said in a loud voice, "Elder, did you see that? So I am not useless. The cultivators of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect are the real useless ones. All of you are so weak. One touch and you will die." Every single sentence was filled with cold disdain and arrogant provocation. "Brat, you—" When Zhu Hong heard Nietian's words, it was as if there was a huge rock on his chest, making him speechless. Nietian's words were like a resounding slap to Zhu Hong's face. How could the latter not be enraged? "You're courting death." In the next moment, Zhu Hong let out a fierce roar like a wild beast that had gone berserk. His figure flashed, and a violent aura surged as he charged toward Nietian. At this moment, the aura of a peak immortal state cultivator spread out, covering an area of tens of thousands of meters. It was terrifying. Chapter 2544. "You're dead." Rumble. Zhu Hong attacked Nietian in a fit of rage. His energy spread out for tens of thousands of meters in all directions, like a massive wave crashing down on Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he sensed the incoming energy. Zhu Hong was an elder of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect, and was at the peak of the God Realm. He wasn't someone the small fries from before could compare to. Nietian had grown stronger in the Heaven Ascension world, but he still hadn't broken through to the peak paramount God level. Therefore, the current him could fight head-on with a half-step peak expert, but he still couldn't fight with a God Realm expert. Upon seeing this, Wu Fengtao's eyes flickered as he exclaimed, "Watch out, Nietian." Never could he have imagined that Zhu Hong would suddenly attack him. He wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Time to die. Hovering in midair, Zhu Hongrun let out a fierce roar that sounded like that of a fierce beast. His aura instantly burst forth and condensed into a terrifyingly large palm that was 10,000 meters long. Like a mountain, It smashed down towards Nietion. What terrifying energy! Everyone's eyes trembled uncontrollably. That kind of violent aura that was on the verge of bursting out covered the sky and covered the earth, enveloping the space within tens of thousands of meters. It was really too terrifying. The energy of a peak god realm expert was powerful and seemed capable of crushing everything in its path. Everyone's hearts were pounding, and their eyes were trembling. They were worried for Nietion. Earth's sword devours the moon. Standing in place, Nietion's sword intent instantly burst forth from his body. The fiend god power within him madly circulated, and the fiend god sword intent surged out. A sword shadow shot up into the sky, like a raging dragon breaking out of an abyss, its might shaking the heavens. Rumble. In the next moment, the sword image and the palm image collided, and a huge explosion rang out. Boundless power spread out in all directions, creating a terrifying shockwave. Bam! In just an instant, the God-Fiend sword shadow was no match for the weight of the palm shadow. It shattered with a loud bang, and an endless amount of sword was spread out in the void. It was extremely violent. Kaboom! At the same time, the sword shadow blasted a hole in the terrifying palm shadow. This is the moment. Nietion abruptly raised his head and stared at the gap on the palm. Then, his figure flashed, and he flew over. A pair of astral soul wings unfurled from his back as his speed increased to the extreme, akin to a bolt of lightning. Demonic eye open. In the blink of an eye, Nietion disregarded the violent force that assaulted his body and forcefully passed through the gap in the palm shadows. His eyes suddenly trembled, and a soul-sucking force appeared, whistling out, formless and traceless, swift and fierce to the extreme, attacking Zhu Hong. Zhu Hong suddenly felt a force that caused his heart to tremble appear, and his pupils abruptly constricted. He wanted to react, but it was already too late. Even though Nietion's demonic eye had yet to accumulate its power to its peak, under the situation of close distance, the power that it could explode with was extremely shocking. Screech! The power of the demonic eye turned into a blade of eye bloodline power that attacked Zhu Hong. Zhu Hong was indeed a cultivator at the peak of the immortal realm. At the moment of life and death, he reacted in the most shocking way. He stepped out and slammed out a palm. Bang! In the next instant, the blade arrived, and after a muffled explosion, it directly destroyed one of Zhu Hong's arms. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, and the smell of blood was extremely pungent. Exploded blood permeated the air, filling the air with the pungent smell of blood. Zhu Hong steadied himself, and his face was extremely gloomy. He attacked first, which was equivalent to destroying one of his arms, but at the same time, he saved half his life. If he didn't attack, that blade would definitely have pierced through his chest, and at the very least, he would have lost half his life. He completely didn't expect that Nietion would be able to explode with such a terrifying attack, which directly threatened his life. Exchanging half his life with the price of an arm. This was already the smallest price to pay. And at this time, Nietion's figure stood in midair, blood hanging on the corner of his mouth. Traces of blood seeped out from the corner of his right eye. Just now, he forcefully resisted the violent impact. Moreover, under the circumstances where the demonic eye's power was not fully accumulated, he forcefully opened it. Overusing the power caused his right eye to endure too much pressure, and blood seeped out. Doing so even affected the nerves in his right eye. The move just now was the move that Nietion had the best chance of winning. Zhu Hong's first time attacking, his defensive heart was not strong. As long as he could severely injure Zhu Hong, there would still be a chance to defeat the latter later. Sadly, Zhu Hong only lost an arm. His combat power was not greatly affected. When the crowd saw the scene in the sky, their expressions were appalled to the extreme. This was the second time that Nietion posed a threat to a peak immortal realm expert. The first time, he sliced off the skin of Xiang Qingshan's face. And this time, he broke off one of Zhu Hong's arms. This combat power and combat talent was truly too terrifying. Little bastard, you're indeed formidable. This elder underestimated you. Zhu Hong's figure stepped out, the aura on his entire body surging frenziedly, covering a stretch of heaven and earth. The killing intent in his eyes was incomparably thick. Elder Zhu, with your status as an elder, you made a move against a junior martial artist. Isn't it too much? Right at this time, Wu Fengtao's voice sounded out. He took a step out, wanted to make a move. But the next instant, three figures moved in unison and actually blocked him. These three people were respectively Xiang Qingshan, Chang Kuan, and Ji Dian. Wu Fengtao's face fell, and he asked coldly, "The three of you, what's the meaning of this?" Xiang Qingshan's face was dark and did not speak. Chang Kuan smiled coldly and said, "Third elder, Nietian already committed a grave mistake by killing young Master Zhu Zhenbei. If you make a move and have a battle with Elder Zhu, that will be piling a mistake on top of a mistake." Ji Dian's face was even darker, and he said, "Brother Zhu wants to kill his nephew's murderer. It's best if we don't interfere." "You." Wu Fengtao's eyes trembled, and his chest tightened. He was momentarily speechless. How could he not know what these three were thinking? They were all ambitious wolves with ulterior motives. Xiang Qingshan's answer was very simple. He hated Nietian and wanted Nietian dead. Chang Kuan, on the other hand, had been speaking up for the 100 Rivers Divine Sect, acting like a slave. As for Ji Dian, he was happy to see Nietian die because he saw how terrifying Nietian was, and he wanted the 10,000 Mountain Sect to lose a genius disciple. "Brat, you're dead." Just then, Zhu Hong's eyes darkened, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. With a roar, his figure moved, and he once again slammed out a palm towards Nietian. He used all of his strength with this palm. He must kill Nietian right away. He will not allow anything to go wrong. As an elder of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect, having one of his arms cut off by Nietian was already a great humiliation to him. If he couldn't kill Nietian now, he wouldn't have the face to see anyone. Nietian's pupils constricted as he sensed the boundless pressure. With his current condition, it was impossible for him to fight against Zhu Hong. However, his speed was not fast enough, and it was difficult for him to escape Zhu Hong's attack range. This time, the odds were stacked against him. Elder Bai Chuan is attacking a junior from the 10,000 Weight Mountain Sect. Don't you feel ashamed? At that moment, a powerful voice rang out in the air. Chapter 2545. What a powerful aura! Suddenly, a majestic palm shadow appeared in the void, falling down. The crowd could feel the boundless aura, and they all cried out in shock. Boom! In the next second, the two palm shadows clashed in midair. One of the palm shadows instantly crumbled. Bang! Following a muffled sound, Zhu Hong's figure was flung backward, leaving a trail of blood in the air. The sudden scene made everyone's eyes tremble, and they were stunned on the spot. The person who attacked was far too powerful. With one palm strike, Zhu Hong was heavily injured. Strangely, there was no one in the sky. It was obvious that the person didn't want to show himself. Who is this person? How can he be so strong? Wu Fengtao's expression froze as he asked in shock. The shock in his heart was at its peak. The person who attacked in the dark had easily injured Zhu Hong with one palm strike. This meant that the person's strength was at least at the half-saint realm. In the entire 10,000 Mountain Sect, other than the Patriarch and a few great elders, there were no other half-saints. Just who was the person who attacked? How could he be so terrifying? The other elders were also in shock and had unpleasant looks on their faces. Who are you? You dare to meddle in the affairs of the 10,000 Mountain Sect. Please show yourself. At this moment, Xiang Qingshan spoke. He suppressed the shock in his heart and shouted. It was dead silent in the void. Xiang Qingshan frowned in confusion. Slap! Slap! Just then, two gusts of qi arrived in the sky. They turned into two palm shadows and landed solidly on Xiang Qingshan's face. Xiang Qingshan's face immediately swelled up. The palm prints on his face were very obvious. Everyone was stunned when they saw this. They were completely dumbfounded. Just who was this person hiding in the dark? How dare he slap the disciplinary elder in front of everyone? Bastard! Xiang Qingshan was stunned for a moment. Then his pupils shrank. He roared furiously and shouted, "Who are you? Why do you want to be enemies with my 10,000-weight mountain sect?" Xiang Qingshan. At the next moment, a powerful voice rang out in the void again. As the enforcement elder, you can't enforce the law impartially. The 2 slaps just now were given on behalf of the disciples of the 10,000-weight mountain sect. You, Xiang Qingshan roared in a low voice. He was so angry that his white hair was standing on end. However, he didn't know where the other party was hiding, so no matter how angry he was, it was useless. Pow! Who would have thought that 2 more streams of energy would appear and hit Xiang Qingshan's face? Xiang Qingshan's face was badly mutilated. It was a tragic sight. Xiang Qingshan, these 2 slaps are for Nie Tian. Once again, a powerful voice rang out in the air. As the enforcement elder of the 10,000-weight mountain sect, you've neglected your duty by watching your sect's disciples being killed. Smack! Pa! Xiang Qingshan opened his mouth in shock, but just as he opened his mouth, 2 more slaps came, and his mouth was slapped so hard that it became crooked. Xiang Qingshan, these 2 slaps are for yourself. The powerful voice rang out in a loud voice. You know that Nie Tian didn't do anything wrong, but because you're afraid of other sects, you insisted that he's guilty. This is your dereliction of duty. From what I see, it's better for you to not be the enforcement elder. The loud voice was like a clap of thunder, enlightening Xiang Qingshan. Xiang Qingshan was stunned and couldn't say anything for a long time. How dare you? At that moment, Chong Kuan suddenly stood out and said with a gloomy face, "Who exactly are you? Just because you're powerful, you think you can humiliate and insult the enforcement elder of the 10,000-weight mountain sect? How does the 10,000-weight mountain sect do things? Do we need an outsider to comment? You beat up the enforcement elder of the 10,000-weight mountain sect in front of everyone. You're going against the entire 10,000-weight mountain sect." Chong Kuan's words were loud and powerful. Chong Kuan, as soon as he finished speaking, the powerful voice in the air sounded cold, releasing undisguised murderous intent. What do you want to do? Chong Kuan felt the murderous intent, and his face suddenly changed. He was terrified, and even his voice was trembling. The person who was hiding was much more powerful than him. He couldn't fight back at all. Slap, slap, slap. In the next moment, Chong Kuan's response was a series of slaps. In the blink of an eye, Chong Kuan's face was swollen like a pig's. He looked much more miserable than Xiang Qingshan. Everyone was shocked when they saw the scene before them. Their expressions were completely stiff, and they didn't know what was going on. Who was the person who had secretly attacked them? Why did he save Nie Tian? And why did he beat up Xiang Qingshan and Chong Kuan in public? Nie Tian's body froze in midair, and the corner of his lips curled up. He thought to himself, "Senior Mu, so you didn't leave at all. You've been following me all this time." The others didn't know the identity of the person who attacked, but Nie Tian already knew. When the person injured Zhu Hong, Nie Tian already knew that the person was Mu Honglu. Mu Honglu disappeared after walking out of the Heaven Ascension realm. Nie Tian thought he had left, but he didn't expect the person to be following him all this time. Why did you hit me?" Chong Kuan's face was already disfigured after being slapped dozens of times. His eyes were trembling as he asked unwillingly and fearfully, "Chong Kuan, you know what you've done?" Mu Honglio's voice sounded cold. "You'll soon find out who I am." Chong Kuan's eyes flickered. He vaguely felt that the person's aura was somewhat familiar. It reminded him of someone, but he didn't dare to believe it. "Who are you? Why have you come to the 10,000-weight mountain sect?" At this moment, Wu Fengtao spoke with a gloomy expression. Although he didn't agree with Xiang Qingshan and Chong Kuan's actions, they were still elders of the 10,000-layer mountain sect. How could the 10,000-layer mountain sect keep its face after being beaten up like this? "Wu Fengtao, go and find Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 now. Also, call Sect Leader 1,000 Clouds and Sect Leader 100 Rivers over. I'll wait for them in the law enforcement hall." Mu Honglu said cold. His tone was completely commanding. Wu Fengtao was startled and couldn't help but frown. QL11, the person knew him, as well as Xiang Qingshan and Chang Kuan. This undoubtedly meant that the person had a special relationship with the 10,000-layer mountain sect. Are you from the 10,000-layer mountain sect? Wu Fengtao's eyes flickered as he asked tentatively. You'll soon find out who I am. Mu Honglu growled cold. What the 10,000-layer mountain sect owes me, and what Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 owes me, I'll get them back today. Wu Fengtao's face darkened. He thought to himself in shock. Could he be an enemy of the 10,000-layer mountain sect? Judging from Mu Honglio's tone, he seemed to be extremely resentful towards the 10,000-layer mountain sect, and it seemed like he was Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's enemy. Chapter 25:46. The disciplinary hall. Wu Fengtao frowned. He could not figure out who the person was. Wu Fengtao, aren't you going? Mu Honglio's voice was heard once again, this time with a threatening tone. Wu Fengtao's face darkened, but he eventually left to ask Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 for help. Although Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had specifically told him not to be disturbed, he had to discuss important matters with the two sect leaders. Now that something so serious had happened, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had to show himself. Xiang Qingshan, all of you, follow me to the disciplinary hall. Mu Honglu said Xiang Qingshan after Wu Fengtao left. Nie Tian, go look for the 7th sect leader. We'll meet in the disciplinary hall. Mu Honglio's voice was heard in Nie Tian's divine sense. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Yeah. Then, he blurred into action and left. Looking at Mu Honglio's expression, it seemed like he was going to confront Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Nie Tian was curious about what had happened back then. A while later, Nie Tian returned to the courtyard of the 7th sect and found Purple Bamboo Tempest. Nie Tian, you're back. Purple Bamboo Tempest's eyes flickered when she saw Nie Tian. It was as if she was hiding from something, but at the same time, she seemed to be anticipating something. Sect leader, the person you wanted to save has been released. He's in the disciplinary hall now. Follow me. Nie Tian did not have time to explain to Purple Bamboo Tempest. Purple Bamboo Tempest's eyes widened. She realized that Nie Tian had already known about her plan. Purple Bamboo Mist took a step forward, looking at Nie Tian with a burning gaze as she asked, Nie Tian, is he all right? Sect leader, we don't have much time to talk. We'll head to the disciplinary hall first. Something big is going to happen to the 10,000-weight mountain sect today, Nie Tian said with a stern look. All right, Purple Bamboo Tempest replied and followed Nie Tian to the disciplinary hall. A moment later, Nie Tian and Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist arrived at the law enforcement hall. At this time, the spacious law enforcement hall was already filled with people. The 10,000-weight mountain sect's main sect elder and the various branch sect leaders were all present. Why hasn't the sect master arrived yet? Xiang Qingshan sat in the law enforcement hall, looking out of the law enforcement hall from time to time, feeling very anxious. Mu Honglio's figure did not appear in the disciplinary hall. He did not want to appear at this moment. Nie Tian and Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist figures appeared, and they strode into the hall. Brat, you still dare to show yourself? Xiang Qingshan roared when he saw that Nie Tian had actually come. I didn't do anything wrong. Why wouldn't I dare to show myself? Nie Tian smiled calmly. Did you do anything wrong? Xiang Qingshan's old face was still swollen. He scolded in a low voice. If it wasn't for you, would so many things have happened? In his opinion, everything that had happened today was caused by Nie Tian. If it wasn't for him killing Zhu Jinbei, so many things would not have happened. Fourth Elder, are you referring to the incident where you were slapped in the face? Nie Tian smiled calmly. His expression was extremely provocative as he said, This matter has nothing to do with me. As the law enforcement elder, you handled things unfairly, and others just couldn't stand it. You. Xiang Qingshan's expression darkened. There was a lump of anger in his chest that he could neither swallow nor spit out. It was extremely uncomfortable. Nie Tian, what's going on? Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist's expression darkened as she asked with a frown. Nie Tian smiled faintly and explained what had happened at the martial arts practice ground. 7th sect leader, Your sect's disciple was arrogant and despotic. He killed someone from the 100 Rivers divine sect. You won't be able to escape punishment for this. Chang Kuan roared fiercely as soon as Nye Tian finished speaking. Well done. To everyone's surprise, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist sneered and said, shameless people like Zhu Jinbei should be killed on sight. If I were here, I would definitely kill him with my own hands. Chang Kuan was stunned on the spot, and he was unable to speak another word. You're Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's younger sister. Aren't you afraid of provoking a war between the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and the 10,000 Mountains Sect with your words? Zhu Hong said coldly with a gloomy expression. He was gravely injured by Mu Honglio's palm strike, and his face was still pale. Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist sneered and said, do you think I don't know what the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and the 1,000 Clouds Divine Sect are planning? You just want to join hands and swallow the 10,000 Mountains Sect. I believe that even if this didn't happen today, the people from the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and the 1,000 Clouds Divine Sect wouldn't leave the 10,000 Mountains Sect so easily. Zhu Hong's expression darkened. His eyes turned cold as he said in a deep voice, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist, do you know what you're saying? Are you trying to provoke the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and the 1,000 Clouds Divine Sect with your attitude? So what? Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist sneered and said, others might be afraid of you, but I, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist, am not. You. Zhu Hong's expression darkened again. He was momentarily speechless. Which of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sects, elders, and branch sect masters wasn't polite to him? However, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist was so arrogant that he couldn't tolerate it. Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist, how arrogant of you. At that instant, a vigorous voice was heard. Following this, a figure appeared and descended majestically. It was a short and plump figure with a short stature, a fat head and big ears, and an unattractive appearance. However, the aura surrounding his body was vigorous and surging. He stood there like a vast ocean, unfathomable. Sect leader. Zhu Hong's eyes lit up when he saw the short fatty. He quickly stood up and bowed as he yelled. This unattractive fatty was none other than the 100 Rivers Divine sect leader, Zhu Dahai. Boom! Almost at the same time, another figure appeared. It was a tall and skinny man who looked like a hemp stick. He stood there with a majestic aura around him and an arrogant posture, like the clouds of the 9 heavens overlooking everything. Sect leader, Ji Jian of the 1,000 Clouds sect stood up and greeted the tall and skinny man respectfully. That tall and skinny man was the 1,000 Clouds Divine sect leader, Ji Gufeng. Nye Tian looked at Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng with a slight frown, unable to hide the shock on his face. Although those two did not look like much, their strength was very frightening. Judging from their aura alone, Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng should be demi-saints, and even more powerful than Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Nye Tian had seen Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 in action before. The latter should be a demi-saint, and there was a considerable gap between him and a demi-saint. Right after Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng appeared, another 2 figures appeared, walking side by side into the hall. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw those 2 figures, and he was quite surprised. Those 2 people walking side by side were actually Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and Kuei Mu Jun. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and Kuei Mu Jun. One was the sect leader of the main sect, while the other was the sect leader of a branch sect. There was a huge difference in their statuses. According to their statuses, if the 2 appeared at the same time, Kuei Mu Jun would have to stand behind Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Chapter 25:47. Chapter 25:47. Chapter 25:47 willingly? How is this possible? Nye Tian looked at the Kuei Mu army. His pupils suddenly constricted, and he almost screamed. He actually found that the strength of the Kuei Mu army had improved. Previously, the Kuei Mu army was only a powerhouse at the peak of the immortal state, but now his aura was not weaker than Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 at all, and even a little stronger. This made Nye Tian completely unable to believe it, because just a few days ago, when he saw the Kuei Mu army, the latter showed no signs of advancing at all. At that time, Nyetian even felt that the Kuei Mu army was no match for purple bamboo flowing mist. However, in just 10 days, the strength of the Kuei Mu army actually advanced to the semi-sage realm, which was too strange. Purple bamboo flowing mist obviously also noticed the advancement of the Kuei Mu army strength. Her pretty face was slightly stunned, and she couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The others in the lobby were also very surprised. What they were more concerned about was how the Kuei Mu army dared to stand side by side with Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. At this time, the Kuei Mu army took a step forward with a proud smile and said loudly, "Elders, sect masters, it just so happens that everyone is here. Lord Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 has something to announce to everyone." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 glanced at the Kuei Mu army with a very ugly expression. In the entire lobby, everyone also began to discuss in a low voice. What's going on today? Is something big going to happen? Sect Master Baichuan and Sect Master Thousand Clouds are here. Are they going to attack our 10,000 weight mountain sect? What's going on with the Kuei Mu army? How dare he stand together with Lord Sect Master? Also, why do I feel that his aura is much stronger than before? Is it my illusion? Everyone discussed in a low voice, and they all looked very surprised. Cough, cough. The Kuei Mu army was very proud at this time. He coughed twice, looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, and said, "Brother Purple Bamboo, tell us." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's expression was extremely ugly. He glanced at the people present, but he was somewhat evasive. Especially when he saw purple bamboo flowing mist, he was very panicked. The scene was silent, but Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 did not speak for a long time. Ahem. Kuei Mu Jun was obviously a little impatient. He coughed twice and said directly, "Brother Ziju, if you don't want to say it, then I will say it for you." As he spoke, he took a step forward and swept his gaze across the crowd. He was really about to speak. "I'll say it myself." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 spoke at that moment. His gaze darkened as he said in a deep voice, "Elders, sect leaders, I have something important to tell everyone today." At this point, he paused, and his eyes flickered for a few seconds before he finally said, "From now on, I, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, am no longer the sect master of the 10,000 weight mountain sect. The new sect master is Lord Kuei Mu Jun." He tried to keep his voice calm, but it was still a little shaky. As soon as he said that, the entire place exploded. Who would have thought that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 would say such a thing when he came here? The 10,000 weight mountain sect was one of the 7 great sects in the frozen ruins. Even though it was a little weak now, it was still an extremely powerful sect. For such a super sect, the position of the sect master was changed as if it was a game. How can anyone accept it? When Yetian heard Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's words, he was also stunned and could not come back to his senses for a long time. In the next moment, the entire law enforcement hall was boiling with discussion. How can Lord Sect Master say such a thing? How can the position of Lord Sect be given to others so easily? What the hell is going on? Did Kuei Mu Jun do something to Lord Sect Master? And the 2 sect masters of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and the 1,000 Clouds Divine Sect, they must be involved in this matter. Everyone discussed with a look of righteous indignation. Silence. At this moment, Kuei Mu Jun suddenly shouted, and his violent aura shocked everyone. The hall instantly became quiet. Kuei Mu Jun stepped forward and said directly, "I know that everyone must be shocked by Brother Ziju's words. But since things have come to this, I hope everyone can calm down and listen to what I have to say." The entire hall suddenly quieted down, and all eyes were on Kuei Mu Jun. Kuei Mu Jun smiled faintly and said loudly, "You may not know, but just now I had a fair duel with Brother Ziju under the witness of the 100 Rivers Sect Master and the 1,000 Clouds Sect Master. The result of the duel was that I won by luck. But unfortunately, Brother Ziju suffered some minor injuries in the battle. He felt that he could no longer be the sect master of the 10,000 Mountain Sect, so he decided to give the position of Lord Sect to me." At this point, Kuei Mu Jun looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, smiled faintly, and said, "Brother Ziju, is this the case?" After hearing Kuei Mu Jun's words, Everyone was stunned, and they all had an incredulous expression. Who would have thought that Kuei Mu Jun actually defeated Purple Bamboo Wolf 7? Judging from Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's current reaction, this matter was true. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face was gloomy, and he looked at Kuei Mu Jun cold, obviously suppressing the anger in his heart. The Kuei Mu army did defeat him, but it was done in an extremely dishonorable way. He originally thought that Kuei Mu Jun only wanted to spar with him and ask for advice. Moreover, it was in front of 100 Rivers Sect Master and 1,000 Clouds Sect Master, so he didn't refuse. But he didn't expect that the Kuei Mu army had concealed its strength and severely injured him in the first move. In the following battles, the Kuei Mu army had been suppressing him, forcing him to admit defeat in the end. The Kuei Mu army knew that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was not an ordinary person, so they did not kill him. However, they had agreed beforehand that if Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 lost, he would have to give up his position as the main sect master. It was only then that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 realized that he had been tricked. With the 100 Rivers Sect Master and the 1,000 Clouds Sect Master as witnesses, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 could not go back on his words and could only give up his position as the main sect master. In fact, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 knew that if he didn't give up the position of the master, the Kuei Mu army would probably kill him. The 100 Rivers Sect Master and the 1,000 Clouds Sect Master were the external help invited by the Kuei Mu army, so they would definitely not sit idly by. This was what had happened before. Because of this, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had no choice but to give up his position as the main sect master. Kuei Mu army, you're too presumptuous. At this time, Xiang Qingshan suddenly stood up and roared in a deep voice. You're just the sect master of the first branch. You've already offended your superiors by fighting with the master sect master. How dare you force the master sect master to give up his position as the main sect master? You're rebelling. Rebelling. The Kuei Mu army smiled coldly and looked at Xiang Qingshan coldly. He said, Fourth Elder, as the law enforcement elder, do you know how serious this crime is? We can't afford such a serious crime. Brother Zizhu was the one who willingly gave up the position of sect master. Do you think I should reject your good intentions? Besides, in recent years, the reputation of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect has been declining day by day. It's about to fall out of the 7 major sections. Don't you feel guilty at all? The 10,000 Weight Mountain sect needs a powerful sect master. Brother Purple Bamboo knows that your ability is limited. So what's wrong with giving up the position of the main sect master to me? Every sentence he said was very sharp, and he spoke confidently and confidently. Kuei Mu army you. Xiang Qingshan's old face darkened, and he was speechless. Humph! The Kuei Mu army suddenly became more arrogant and said savagely, Elders, sect masters, I know you're not convinced. Chapter 25:48. Chapter 25:48. Chapter 25:48. Arrogant. The Kuei Mu army's attitude was very arrogant, and his eyes were cold and contemptuous as he directly glanced at everyone present. He said that as long as someone could defeat him, he would give up the position of sect master. This was equivalent to him challenging all the elders and branch sect leaders present. The reason why he dared to be so arrogant was, of course, that he had his own capital. At this moment, he was already a peak half-saint powerhouse and could even fight against a weaker demi-saint. Why would he be afraid of anyone present? The elders and sect masters of the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect were only at the peak of godly state, and the weaker ones were only at the peak of half-step. How could they fight against the Kuei Mu army? As soon as the Kuei Mu army's voice fell, the entire hall fell into a dead silence, and no one dared to speak for a long time. Nie Tian frowned with a worried expression. His current strength was too weak, and his status was not high enough. He was not even qualified to challenge the Kuei Mu army. The most important thing was that with the strength of the Kuei Mu army, he could be killed instantly. At this time, he had completely understood the conspiracy plan of the Kuei Mu army. The Kuei Mu army must have reached some kind of compromise with the 100 Rivers Sect Master and the 1,000 Clouds Sect Master, promising to give the latter two benefits, which convinced them to support him. But the most important thing was that the Kuei Mu army was strong enough to have the capital to compete with Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. After a long time, no one dared to speak in the huge hall. Everyone, since ancient times, the position of sect master has always been occupied by the capable. At this time, Chang Kuan suddenly stood up and said with a strange expression, "Since Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 has given up the position of sect master to sect master Kuei Mu, of course we have to accept it. I, Chang Kuan, am willing to be the first to express my support for sect master Kuei Mu to be the sect master of our 10,000 Layer Mountain sect." With that, Chang Kuan took a step forward, knelt on one knee, and said loudly to the Kuei Mu army, "Chang Kuan, the fifth elder of the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect master, greets the sect master." The scene in front of them stunned everyone. Their expressions froze, and they could not react for a long time. Chang Kuan's performance was really good. In front of so many people, he directly knelt down to the Kuei Mu army, which was really beyond everyone's expectations. Nye Tian looked at Chang Kuan with disgust. He did not find it strange at all. He had long known that Chang Kuan had betrayed the Kuei Mu army, so the scene in front of him must have been discussed by the Kuei Mu army and Chang Kuan in advance to show everyone present. "Fifth Elder, please get up." Kuei Mu Jun laughed and hurried forward to help Chang Kuan up. But at this time, Xiang Qingshan suddenly stood up and angrily shouted. He pointed at Chang Kuan and said, "Chang Kuan, the head sect lord has always treated you well. How dare you betray him?" "Xiang Qingshan, what do you mean?" Chang Kuan suddenly turned around and innocently looked at Xiang Qingshan, saying, "I, Chang Kuan, have always been above board and candid. I'm loyal to the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect, not one person. I'll support whoever is stronger and can bring the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect back to prominence. Is there anything wrong with that?" "Bullsh asterisk T." Xiang Qingshan growled and directly swore. He was not a fool. How could he not see that Chang Kuan must have discussed with the Kuei Mu army to put on a show for everyone? Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face was gloomy. How could he not see it? But he was already defeated by the Kuei Mu army. So what could he do? "Xiang Qingshan, if you're not convinced, you can challenge me. As long as you can defeat me, the position of the head sect is yours." At this time, the Kuei Mu army stepped forward and said aggressively, "Challenge me then. Do you think I'll be afraid of you?" Xiang Qingshan roared and released his aura. When Ye Tian saw this scene, his eyes narrowed slightly. Although Xiang Qingshan was a very selfish person, he was loyal to Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. "You're courting death." The Kuei Mu army roared, and then the aura of his whole body burst out. A wave of power rolled out and pressed towards Xiang Qingshan. Boom! In the next moment, the two terrifying auras collided in the void, and it made a muffled sound like metal colliding with stone. Boom! A wild wave surged out and raged in the void. Fortunately, the law enforcement hall was protected by a large formation. Otherwise, under the impact of the wave, it would definitely collapse directly. Whoosh! 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 In the next moment, Xiang Qingshan only held on for a moment, and then his body trembled and he retreated repeatedly. After all, he was only a powerhouse at the peak of the god state. In front of a half-saint powerhouse, he had no power to fight at all. Puff! Immediately, Xiang Qingshan spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as paper. Obviously, he could not hold on any longer. However, the Kuei Mu army obviously had no intention of stopping. Instead, the aura of his whole body was released more violently. Obviously, he wanted to kill Xiang Qingshan directly. This move was called killing the chicken to warn the monkeys, killing one to warn the others. If Xiang Qingshan was not convinced, the Kuei Mu army would kill him directly and let those who were not convinced see the consequences of resistance. Stop! At this moment, a clear voice sounded. It was Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Who do you think you are? A sect leader of a branch sect dares to order the main sect? The Kuei Mu army glanced coldly at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 before he roared fiercely, and then his entire body's aura rumbled out and pressed down violently towards Xiang Qingshan. "Bastard!" Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 shouted in a delicate voice, and then she similarly released her aura to help Xiang Qingshan resist the attack. "You're courting death." The Kuei Mu army laughed coldly, and then he actually slapped his palm forward. Instantly, the surging energy from his palm formed a violent and enormous wave that roared and surged through the sky, and it emanated an even more terrifying aura. Bang! Bang! After that, two muffled bangs resounded. Xiang Qingshan and Purple Bamboo Wolf's figures were blasted flying, and they smashed heavily against two enormous stone pillars with dragon carvings on them. Even though the stone pillars were protected by a formation, the impact from the collision between Xiang Qingshan and Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was too strong, and it directly broke the stone pillars. Both of them suffered extremely heavy injuries after they fell to the ground. Xiang Qingshan's entire body was drenched in blood, and he was on the verge of death. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was in a comparatively better state. Only a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth, and her face was slightly pale. Hiss! Everyone gasped when they saw this scene, and they looked at the Kuei Mu army in horror. The fear in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. They didn't expect that the strength of the Kuei Mu army was so strong that they could easily injure Xiang Qingshan and Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. At this time, Nietian looked at the Kuei Mu army with a strange expression. He felt the aura of the annihilation seal from the power released by the Kuei Mu army just now. He guessed that the reason why the strength of the Kuei Mu army could suddenly skyrocket must be related to Kuei Mu Jingchen. Who else is still unconvinced? Stand up. The Kuei Mu army defeated Xiang Qingshan and Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, and they became even more arrogant. They roared and looked at everyone present disdainfully. Everyone's face stiffened, and then they lowered their heads, not even daring to breathe loudly. The Kuei Mu army looked at everyone's reaction, and the disdain on their faces became more intense. Me. But at this moment, a low roar suddenly sounded outside the hall. Immediately, a figure soared through the air and landed on the law enforcement hall like a mad dragon. When this figure landed, everyone felt a violent and unparalleled aura enveloping the entire law enforcement hall. It was extremely terrifying. He finally appeared. When Yetian saw the face of this figure clearly, his eyes narrowed slightly, and the corners of his mouth raised into a faint arc. Chapter 2549. Chapter 2549. Chapter 2549. Unqualified Nietian's eyes were filled with surprise when he saw Mu Honglu. He knew that Mu Honglu would definitely appear. If there was one person in the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect who could defeat the Kuei Mu army, it would definitely be Mu Honglu. Nietian had already witnessed Mu Hongliu's abilities. The latter's strength was at least at the level of a half-saint, or even a demi-saint. Mu Honglu had been imprisoned in the Heaven Ascending realm. Although he was tortured by a forbidden curse, he had never stopped cultivating for a single day. The divine energy in the Heaven Ascending realm was denser than that of the frozen ruins, making it more suitable for martial artists to cultivate. Therefore, not only did Mu Hongliu's strength not stop, it had even improved. Mu Hongliu's sudden appearance shrouded the entire disciplinary hall with a wild aura, causing everyone to feel a significant amount of pressure. Everyone's eyes trembled as they focused on Mu Honglu. This face caused everyone to feel a sense of familiarity yet unfamiliarity, shock yet fear. Countless gazes trembled slightly as if they were hesitating, not daring to believe the identity of the person before them. Honglu. Purple Bamboo Mist stared at Mu Honglu with flickering eyes and finally yelled out, "Mu Honglu! He's Mu Honglu!" In the next moment, someone recognized Mu Honglu and yelled out as if they had seen a ghost. "It really is Mu Honglu!" More people reacted and screamed. No one had expected that the person who appeared at that moment would be Mu Honglu. The person who was regarded as a traitor of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect had actually appeared at this moment. It was something that no one had expected. How is this possible? Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's eyes widened when he saw Mu Honglu appear. He was stunned on the spot, and could not react for a long time. In the next moment, the entire disciplinary hall was in chaos. Mu Honglu, that traitor. Why did he appear at this moment? That traitor. Back then, Master Sect Master asked him to protect our sacred relic, but he failed and caused the relic to be lost. Master Sect Master was soft-hearted and did not kill him. Instead, he imprisoned him in the Heaven Ascending realm. I didn't expect this guy to appear at this moment. How did he escape from the Heaven Ascending realm? What was he trying to do by appearing at this moment? Don't tell me you're here to laugh at the sect. The crowd discussed animatedly, and their words were extremely harsh. All of them took Mu Honglu to be a traitor to the sect. Mu Honglu's expression was extremely calm. He looked at Purple Bamboo Mist and said in a deep voice, "Mist, you've suffered." As Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist looked at the person she had thought about day and night standing right before her, she felt as if she was dreaming. She could no longer hold back the tears in her eyes, and they flowed down her cheeks. "Whoever made my woman cry, I, Mu Honglu, shall kill him." Mu Honglu took a step forward and held Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist in his arms. He glanced at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 coldly, and then at the Kuei Mu army. Kuei Mu Jun was locked on by Mu Honglu's cold eyes, and he felt a chill rising from the bottom of his heart, making him shiver. "Kuei Mu army, I challenge you," Mu Honglu said coldly, and his eyes were full of killing intent. The Kuei Mu Jun frowned slightly. His eyes flickered when he sensed the aura around Mu Honglu. How could he not see that Mu Honglu's strength was not inferior to his? In fact, Mu Honglu was even stronger than Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. He had no confidence in fighting Mu Honglu. The sudden turn of events caused everyone to be taken aback, and their gazes became complicated. At this moment, the entire 10,000-weight mountain sect was in a difficult situation. The Kuei Mu army used despicable means to force Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to give up his position as the sect master. If the Kuei Mu army succeeded in becoming the sect master, he might do something bad. The sect master of the 100 Rivers sect and the 1,000 Clouds sect did not come here for nothing to support the Kuei Mu army. Therefore, most of the people present did not want the Kuei Mu army to become the sect master. But now, apart from Mu Honglu, no one dared to challenge the Kuei Mu army. The great 10,000-layer mountain sect had to be saved by a former traitor when it was in trouble. That was really ironic. Mu Honglu, you're a traitor of the 10,000-layer mountain sect. What right do you have to challenge me? The Kuei Mu army was timid and did not dare to accept the challenge. Instead, he said with a cold smile. Everyone was stunned when they heard the Kuei Mu army's words, and their eyes became strange. No one present was a fool. Everyone could tell that the Kuei Mu army was afraid. I, Mu Honglu, am from the 10,000-layer mountain sect. Why am I not qualified to challenge you? Mu Honglu smiled coldly and said, Kuei Mu army, if you dare not accept my challenge, then admit defeat directly. Otherwise, you'll lose your life. Mu Honglu you. The Kuei Mu army's face darkened when he heard Mu Honglu's words. He was so embarrassed that he could not speak for a while. Mu Honglu was too arrogant. He did not take him seriously at all. Mu Honglu. At that moment, a low voice was heard. A short and fat figure walked out and said sarcastically, You're a traitor of the 10,000-layer mountain sect. Even if you're not expelled from the sect, you're the lowliest person in the sect. What right do you have to challenge Brother Kuei Mu? Everyone was stunned and looked at the person who spoke. It turned out to be the 100 Rivers sect master, Zhu Dehai. Brother Zhu is right. It's ridiculous that a traitor dares to challenge the position of the main sect. Then, another voice echoed Zhu Dehai. The voice belonged to none other than the 1,000 Clouds sect master, Ji Gufeng. Everyone was even more stunned when they heard Ji Gufeng suddenly speak. The 100 Rivers sect master and the 1,000 Clouds sect master stood out to speak for the Kuei Mu army at the same time. Obviously, they were expressing their stance and threatening Mu Honglu to retreat. Mu Honglu glanced at Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng. His lips curled into a cold smile, and his eyes were extremely gloomy. He said directly, Zhu Dehai, Ji Gufeng, whether I'm qualified to challenge the Kuei Mu army or not is the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect's business? What does it have to do with the two of you? Besides, this is the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect's law enforcement hall. We're dealing with the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect's business here. As outsiders, you shouldn't be here, Mu Honglu said coldly. He actually wanted to drive Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng out of the law enforcement hall. The atmosphere suddenly became strange. Everyone's eyes were slightly trembling, and their nerves were tense. Nobody expected Mu Honglu to be so overbearing and speak to the masters of the two sacred sects like that. Mu Honglu, you're too arrogant. Zhu Dehai's face darkened. He roared furiously and was about to attack Brother Zhu. However, at that moment, Ji Gufeng suddenly extended his hand and stopped Zhu Dehai. Then, Ji Gufeng took a step forward and said calmly, Mu Honglu, you're right. As outsiders, we really shouldn't interfere with the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect's business. In that case, let's ask Brother Zizhu if he agrees to you challenging sect Master Kuei Mu. Chapter 2550. Nod or shake. Ji Gufeng looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 with a gloomy gaze. The threat in his eyes was very strong. Yes. At this moment, Kuei Mu Jun's face lit up with joy. He stepped forward and said, let Brother Zizhu decide if you, Mu Honglu, are qualified to challenge me. Everyone was stunned, and they were unable to react. Why did the matter suddenly turn to Purple Bamboo Wolf 7? But in the next moment, everyone understood. It was obvious that Ji Gufeng and the others were threatening Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, hoping to use him to force Mu Honglu to stop. Mu Honglio's aura was very strong, and he looked very strong. No one knew how strong he was exactly. However, Ji Gufeng knew that Mu Honglu was once the #1 genius of the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect when he was young. Even Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was inferior to him. The reason why Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was able to become the leader of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect was because of Mu Honglio's support. If Mu Honglu had competed for the position of the sect master back then, the sect master of the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect would have been Mu Honglu instead of Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. The reason why Ji Gufeng was so afraid of Mu Honglu was because he had lost to Mu Honglu before. Even Zhu Dehai had been defeated by Mu Honglu. More than 100,000 years ago, Mu Honglu had outshone all the other geniuses of the 7 sects in the great competition of the 7 major sects and became the martial champion of the great competition. After so many years, Ji Gufeng, Zhu Dehai, and the others had all become sect leaders of their own sections. However, Mu Honglu had become a traitor. This was the result of fate. One couldn't help but sigh. It was precisely because of this that Ji Gufeng was extremely fearful of Mu Honglu. The Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was Mu Honglio's sworn brother. It was appropriate for him to speak up and make Mu Honglu stop. All right. Mu Honglu looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 calmly and said, my good sworn brother, I'll let you decide today whether I, Mu Honglu, am qualified to challenge the Kuei Mu army. If you agree, I, Mu Honglu, will fight for the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect, even if I have to risk my life. If you shake your head, I, Mu Honglu, will leave immediately. I will never step into the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect again. His deep voice was exceptionally resolute, as if every word he said was an oath made in blood. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's eyes trembled. When he sensed the determination in Mu Honglio's eyes, he panicked. Everyone was influenced by Mu Honglio's words. Their eyes trembled as they waited for Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to nod his head. However, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was hesitating. He knew that the threat posed by Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng was not that simple. Even if Mu Honglu could defeat the Kuei Mu army, could he defeat Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng? The next choice would directly affect the fate of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect. Was it a wise choice to place the fate of a sect in Mu Honglio's hands? More importantly, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had selfish motives. He had let Mu Honglu down. At this moment, Kuei Mu Jun sneered and said, so what if a traitor of the sect speaks beautifully? Who doesn't know how to act sanctimonious? Nye Tian looked at Mu Honglu and was greatly touched. Mu Honglu was indeed a person who valued friendship and righteousness. When he was in the heavenly ascension realm, he already knew that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had done something wrong to him. However, for the sake of the sect and his brothers, he still stepped forward bravely and risked his life to fight for the sect. In Ye Tian's opinion, Mu Honglu was definitely not acting when he said that he would risk his life to fight for the sect. He was really prepared to do so. Master Sect Leader, Xiang Qingshan, beg Master Sect Leader to nod your head and let Mu Honglu challenge the Kuei Mu army. Just as the Kuei Mu army finished speaking, another figure appeared. It was actually Xiang Qingshan who'd taken a step forward, and he dragged his bloody body as he knelt before Violet Bamboo Wolf 7 and pleaded with a pleading voice. Xiang Qingshan knew that he was not an upright person, but he still had a choice in the face of great right and wrong. Master Sect Leader, please nod your head and let Mu Honglu challenge the Kuei Mu army. In the next moment, more people knelt down and pleaded with Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. You guys are... Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face darkened. He did not know what to do. Seeing this scene, the Kuei Mu army's face was even more gloomy. He did not expect that he would be so unpopular that everyone objected to him. Big brother. Just as Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was hesitating, Purple Bamboo, Flowing Mist walked over with sparkling eyes and said, If you still think of me as your little sister, nod your head. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 looked at Purple Bamboo, Flowing Mist. His eyes suddenly narrowed and a trace of tears surged out. Since he imprisoned Mu Honglu, this was the first time Purple Bamboo, Flowing Mist had called him Big Brother. I agree. In the next moment, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded his head heavily and finally agreed. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Seeing Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodding his head, Zhu Dahai and Ji Goofing were shocked and could not say anything else. Okay, Mu Honglu roared. Then he turned around and stared at the Kuei Mu army. Cold, he said, Kuei Mu army, let's fight to the death. Feeling Mu Honglio's killing intent, the Kuei Mu army could not help but tremble in fear. He was too afraid of Mu Honglu, but at this moment, he had no way out. He could only fight. Let's fight. The Kuei Mu army roared to cheer himself up. Everyone's eyes lit up. It was rare to see a battle between two superpower houses. Then, everyone left the law enforcement hall and went to the martial arts practice field. After a while, everyone came out of the martial arts practice field. In the sky above the martial arts practice field, two figures stood facing each other like two mountains. They were Mu Honglu and the Kuei Mu army. Kuei Mu army, you only have one chance to fight. Cherish it, Mu Honglu said cold with a fierce look in his eyes. Mu Honglu, you are too arrogant. The Kuei Mu army roared angrily. His aura rose, and a violent force flowed around him, causing the surroundings to shake. He was a half-saint powerhouse, but Mu Honglu did not take him seriously at all. How could he not be angry? A half-saint powerhouse is so terrifying. The people outside the martial arts practice field felt the overwhelming aura, and their eyes trembled in fear. Many people present had never seen a half-saint powerhouse fight. How could they not be terrified when they felt the sweeping aura at this time? I will kill you with one strike. Looking at the Kuei Mu army, Mu Honglu sneered, and then a red longsword appeared in his hand. The red longsword was extremely strange. It was crimson all over, and the body of the sword was not solid, but liquid, and it was constantly surging with a terrifying sword essence. What a terrifying sword essence! Nie Tian felt the terrifying sword essence in Mu Honglio's longsword, and his expression changed. He did not expect Mu Honglu to be such a terrifying swordsman. Judging from the aura of the sword essence, Mu Honglu was at least a legendary swordsman, and he might even be a supreme swordsman. Red Stream, 1,000 Blades. When Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and the others saw the long sword in Mu Honglio's hand, they could not help but cry out in shock. Chapter 25:51. Crimson Stream, 1,000 Blades. Oh my God, that's Crimson Stream, 1,000 Blades. Everyone looked at the long sword in Mu Honglio's hand, and their eyes trembled as they exclaimed. The name Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades, was not unfamiliar to the warriors in the entire frozen ruins. More than 100,000 years ago, Mu Honglu relied on this sword to suppress the heroes and set foot on the position of martial leader in the seven-sect grand competition. Rumor had it that Mu Honglu rarely used Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades. Once he used it, it meant that he was angry and would definitely kill. Previously, Mu Honglu wasn't called this name, but the sword Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades was too famous, so his name became Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades. Because once Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades appeared, it must kill, so this sword had another name. Sword of Death. You want to kill me? When the Kuei Mu army saw Mu Honglu took out Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades, his face changed, and his eyes revealed an uncontrollable look of horror. Since Mu Honglu used Crimson Stream, Thousand Blades, it meant that he was determined to kill the Kuei Mu army. I've said it before. Mu Honglu, will kill anyone who makes my woman cry. Mu Honglu said coldly. Crimson sword intent flowed on the red stream, Thousand Edge, as if it was dripping with fresh blood. It dyed the sky red, causing the entire world to be filled with a bloody aura. Just now, the Kuei Mu army attacked Purple Bamboo, flowing mist, and even injured the latter. Mu Honglu saw this scene with his own eyes, and he would never forget it. At this time, he wasn't going to challenge the Kuei Mu army, but to kill the latter. The Kuei Mu army's eyes trembled slightly, and he couldn't hide the horror in his heart. But at this moment, he had no way out, and he could only fight desperately. Mu Honglu, I'd like to see if your Sword of Death is really as powerful as the legends say. Making up his mind, the Kuei Mu Jun roared and his aura surged to the extreme. Faintly, the aura around him was filled with a strong aura of infinite annihilation power. Sure enough, the improvement of this guy's strength is related to the infinite annihilation death seal. When Yetian saw this scene, he frowned slightly, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He had previously guessed that the reason why the Kuei Mu army's strength could improve might be related to Kuei Mu Jingxin's annihilation death seal. At this moment, he sensed the aura of the Kuei Mu army, and he was even more convinced of his guess. He guessed correctly. The reason why the strength of the Kuei Mu army could improve was because he had been constantly absorbing the power of the myriad annihilation death seal since a long time ago. This was a cultivation method that was close to self-mutilation. It used the power of 10,000 extermination to destroy the physical body and martial body, using this to stimulate the potential of the martial body. However, when the power of 10,000 annihilation reached a certain level, it could help the Kuei Mu army break through to the half-sage realm. He dared to challenge Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 for the position of Sect Master because he had broken through to the half-saint realm. However, what the Kuei Mu army never expected was that after he defeated Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, another Mu Honglu appeared. You have a chance to make one move. Come. At this moment, Mu Honglu spoke in a cold tone, and the killing intent in his eyes was extremely sharp. I'll kill you in one move. The Kuei Mu army was completely enraged, and it let out a fierce roar like a wild beast. Then its figure moved, and its aura surged as it slapped down fiercely. Boom! In the next moment, the power of 10,000 annihilation condensed in the void, and a terrifying claw of death appeared. It was extremely sharp and flickered with a cold light, and it seemed as if it could tear everything apart. It smashed towards Mu Honglu. Watch out! The fierce scene made everyone's hearts sink, and they shouted anxiously. Especially Purple Bamboo Lu Lan. Her beautiful eyes trembled, and her nerves were stretched to the extreme. Honglu, flowing fire annihilation. However, Mu Honglu stood in the same place, and he didn't even look at it. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile, and he raised the red stream thousand blade in his hand and slashed out madly. Boom! Then, the sword intent condensed in the void, and a mighty sword shadow appeared. It was crimson like fire, like a wild beast of fire, and it roared in the void. The surging murderous aura surged out, and it fiercely pounced towards the claw of death in the air. Boom! In the next moment, the two extreme forces collided with each other, and a violent explosion sounded in the air. Endless violent force raged out, and it was extremely terrifying, as if it wanted to destroy and devour everything. However, in the next moment, the claw of death couldn't withstand the pressure of the red stream's sword intent, and it suddenly collapsed, turning into endless waves of air that dispersed. No! In an instant, the Kuei Mu army felt the aura of death approaching, and he shouted in horror. Unfortunately, it was too late. His figure was directly engulfed by the sword shadow, and he instantly turned into a bloody light and disappeared. The scene in the sky stunned everyone, and they instantly turned into wooden statues and were petrified on the spot. One sword, just one sword, and Mu Honglu ended the battle in a simple and direct manner. The arrogant Kuei Mu army couldn't even withstand one sword from Mu Honglu, and they died instantly. The power of Mu Honglio's sword was terrifying. The Redstream Thousand Blade, the Sword of Death, really lived up to its name. After a long time, the sword intent in the void dissipated. Mu Honglio's figure stood in the sky like a sharp sword with a sharp edge. Mu Honglu! Mu Honglu! Mu Honglu! The crowd only reacted at this moment, and they actually shouted in unison. The shouts were like a tsunami, and each wave was louder than the last, resounding through the entire martial arts field and the entire 10,000 mountains. Mu Honglu became a legend with one sword, turning from a traitor to a hero. However, at this moment, he didn't look good. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, and his face was a little pale. Although he had absorbed some of the purple bamboo's forbidden power, and the forbidden power curse in his body had been alleviated, it was not completely broken after all. Forcefully using such a powerful sword intent was a great burden on his martial body. However, he didn't care. He moved his figure and came in front of Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and said in a deep voice, "Brother, I've helped you get rid of the real traitor." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's eyes couldn't stop flickering, and he seemed to be avoiding something, as if he didn't dare to look Mu Honglu in the eye. "Red, Honglu, you've worked hard." After a long time, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 finally said a sentence, but he was stuttering, and it was obvious that his teeth were chattering. At this moment, facing Mu Honglu, he was at a loss. "Brother, we still have a lot to talk about." Mu Honglio's lips curled into a cold smile, and then he said, "But before we talk, let's get rid of the trouble in front of us first." After saying that, he took a step forward and looked directly at Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng. He said, "Zhu Dahai, Ji Gufeng, I've killed the real traitor of our 10,000 Mountains sect. Next, it's time to settle the debt you owe the 10,000 Mountains sect." Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng felt Mu Honglio's overbearing manner, and their eyes trembled, and their faces turned extremely ugly. Mu Honglu was too arrogant. He didn't even care about the sect masters of the two divine sects. However, everyone knew that Mu Honglu was arrogant because he had the ability to be arrogant. Not everyone had the ability to kill the Kuei Mu army with one sword. Chapter 25:52. Mu Honglu looked at Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng with a gloomy gaze. His expression was cold and murderous, carrying an extremely strong threat. Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng were, after all, the leaders of their respective sections. "Mu Honglu, I'd like to see how you're going to make my 100 Rivers Divine sect pay the debt." Zhu Dahai snickered, still able to maintain his composure. "Mu Honglu, I'm curious as well. What are you going to do next?" Ji Gufeng snickered as well. "All right," Mu Honglu shouted and said sternly, "then please listen carefully." Next, he took a step forward and locked his gaze on Zhu Dahai. Zhu Jinbei, a disciple of the 100 Rivers Divine sect, humiliated a female disciple of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect in front of countless disciples of my sect. He is provoking the 10,000 Mountain sect by doing this. He must pay the price for his arrogant behavior. Zhu Dahai's expression darkened after hearing Mu Honglio's words. "Mu Honglu, don't make irresponsible remarks." Zhu Jinbei has always been calm and sincere. He would never do something like this. You must be the one who framed him. Then, He turned around and looked at Zhu Hong. "Zhu Hong, where's Zhu Jinbei? Tell him to come see me." Zhu Hong walked over with an extremely embarrassed expression. His teeth were chattering as he said, Sect Master, Zhu Jinbei, what happened to him?" Zhu Dahai didn't know about Zhu Jinbei yet. Seeing Zhu Hong so nervous, he had a premonition that something had happened and roared. "Zhu Jinbei was killed." Zhu Hong blurted out in annoyance. "Killed?" Zhu Dahai froze, and his expression darkened. Like an enraged beast, he roared, "Who killed him?" "I killed him." Right at this moment, an indifferent voice sounded out. It was extremely calm and indifferent. "You." Zhu Dahai turned around and glared at the silver-haired youth. His eyes were murderous as he screamed, "How dare you kill someone from the 100 Rivers divine sect?" This silver-haired young man was none other than Nie Tian. Nie Tian faintly smiled and said calmly, "Zhu Jinbei dared to humiliate a female disciple of the 10,000-layer mountain sect. Why wouldn't I dare to kill him?" His expression was indifferent and his tone was calm, as if killing Zhu Jinbei was a matter of course. Indeed, as far as Nie Tian was concerned, killing Zhu Jinbei was a matter of course. Letting a scumbag like Zhu Jinbei continue to live was truly intolerable by the heavens. "Little bastard, you're courting death." Zhu Dahai roared in anger. Instantly, his entire body's energy surged out, turning into waves of pressure that pressed down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and was about to resist. Bang! Right at this moment, a strand of sword insight whistled by, and it directly broke through Zhu Dahai's imposing aura and pressure. Moreover, it forcefully forced Zhu Dahai to take a few steps back. The person who had attacked was none other than Mu Honglu. "Zhu Dahai, how dare you attack my disciple in the 10,000-layer mountain sect? Do you really think the 10,000-layer mountain sect is so easy to bully?" Mu Honglu stepped forward with a murderous look in his eyes. "Do you believe I won't let you go back alive?" Zhu Dahai steadied himself. His expression changed drastically as he stared at Mu Honglu in fear. He didn't expect Mu Honglu's aura to be so powerful that it was even stronger than his. In the next moment, Zhu Dahai's expression darkened as he said, Mu Honglu, even if Zhu Jinbei did something wrong, he's already dead. What more do you want?" Mu Honglu smiled cold and said, "It's not what I want, but what does the 100 Rivers divine sect want?" "Mu Honglu, what do you mean by this?" Zhu Dahai suppressed the anger in his heart and yelled. Mu Honglu sneered and said, "A mere disciple dares to humiliate a female disciple of the 10,000-layer mountain sect in front of so many people. Your 100 Rivers divine sect is too arrogant. Do you think this is over with Zhu Jinbei's death?" "Mu Honglu, what do you want?" Zhu Dahai's expression darkened. He felt as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest, and he was about to suffocate to death. If it was in the past, and Zhu Jinbei died in the hands of the 10,000-layer mountain sect, he would definitely make the 10,000-layer mountain sect pay a heavy price. But now, Mu Honglu had appeared out of nowhere and was extremely domineering. Zhu Dahai wasn't thinking about making the 10,000-layer mountain sect pay, but how to escape unscathed. First of all, Zhu Jinbei did such a despicable thing. As the 100 Rivers divine sect leader, you can't escape the blame of not disciplining him properly. Mu Honglu smiled cold and said, "Therefore, I want you to lower your head and admit your mistake in front of all the 10,000-layer mountain sect disciples." "Lower my head and admit my mistake?" Zhu Dahai's eyes trembled and he yelled, "Don't even think about it." He was the sect leader after all. If word got out that he had to lower his head and admit his mistake to so many people, how could he still be the sect leader? In the future, the people of the 100 Rivers divine sect would have to lower their heads when they see the 10,000-layer mountain sect. "You're not willing?" Mu Honglu smiled cold. Then his eyes flashed coldly, and he said, "Then don't even think about walking out of the 10,000-layer mountain sect alive today." "Mu Honglu, you." Zhu Dahai's expression changed, and his eyes were filled with shock. He never expected Mu Honglu to be so forceful. Nie Tian was also stunned. He had thought that Mu Honglu was a man who valued relationships. He didn't expect him to be so terrifying when he was forceful. At this moment, Mu Honglu was basically pressing down on Zhu Dehai's head and asking him to lower his head and admit his mistake. However, Nie Tian was a little worried. Was Mu Honglu really a match for Zhu Dehai? Moreover, there was still Ji Gufeng. Would Mu Honglu really be fine when he was so forceful? Mu Honglu, you're forcing me. Zhu Dehai growled. His face was extremely gloomy and his eyes were red, as if he was ready to fight to the death. Zhu Dehai, I'm not forcing you. The sword of death is forcing you. Mu Honglu didn't back down at all. He took a step forward and the red stream, Thousand Blade, appeared behind him. It floated in the air and unleashed an extremely sharp sword will. Nie Tian felt Mu Honglio's sword will at such a close distance. His expression changed, and he exclaimed inwardly, "Ultimate sword form." Previously, he had already guessed that Mu Honglu was most likely a legendary swordsman. Now that he felt the aura of his opponent's sword will, he realized that Mu Honglu was actually at the level of the ultimate sword form. No wonder Mu Honglu was so overbearing. It turned out that his level of swordsmanship was so terrifying. Mu Honglio's martial prowess should be at the level of a half-saint. However, he possessed the ultimate sword form, which was enough for him to fight against a demi-saint and gain the upper hand. Zhu Dehai's eyes trembled as he felt the terrifying sword will. His face turned pale and green. What about me? Mu Honglu smiled coldly. He glared at Zhu Dehai and asked coldly, Zhu Dehai, I'll ask you again. Are you going to lower your head and admit your mistake? Every single word was filled with killing intent. It was chilling and frightening. Chapter 25:53. Chapter 25:53. Chapter 25:53. I am not greedy. Zhu Dehai nodded. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their mouths were wide open, but no words came out. The chieftain of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect, a mighty demi-saint, had actually nodded and admitted defeat. Red Stream, Thousand Edges, the deterrent power of the Sword of Death, was actually this great. Even Ji Gufeng, who was standing next to Zhu Dehai, was completely stunned. He knew Zhu Dehai's character very well. He was tough, but not scheming enough. He originally thought that Zhu Dehai would have a battle of life and death with Mu Honglu. He did not expect Zhu Dehai to admit defeat. Therefore, he was in an awkward situation. If Zhu Dehai were to fight Mu Honglu, he would be able to take the opportunity to see how strong Mu Honglu was. But now, he didn't have the chance. After Mu Honglu dealt with Zhu Dehai, he would definitely target Ji Gufeng. Ji Gufeng's schemes ran deep, but against the threat of the Sword of Death, no matter how smart he wouldn't risk his life. I, Zhu Dehai, represent the 100 Rivers Divine Sect to apologize to the disciples of the 10,000 Mountain Sect. I'm sorry. Zhu Dehai took a step forward, slightly lowered his head, and spoke in a voice as low as a fly. Although his voice wasn't loud, it sounded like a thunderclap announcing good news to everyone present. The fact that Grandmaster Bai Chuan had lowered his head and apologized to them was something that no one had ever expected. Very good. Mu Honglu smiled and continued. Zhu Dehai, since you know you're wrong, you should compensate the 10,000 Weight Mountain Sect. Compensation? Zhu Dehai was stunned, and his expression changed drastically. He had not expected Mu Honglu to go so far as to demand compensation from him. Mu Honglu, don't go too far. Zhu Dehai roared coldly. He was obviously furious. Is he going too far? Mu Honglu sneered. He glanced at Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng and said, Zhu Dehai, Ji Gufeng, it can't be a coincidence that the two of you appeared at the 10,000 Weight Mountain Sect at the same time, right? If I'm not mistaken, it was the Kuei Mu army who sent you here. The Kuei Mu army wants to usurp the position of the main sect, so he asked the two of you to support him. Since the two of you have come, you must have obtained great benefits. Tell me, what did the Kuei Mu army promise you? Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng's faces darkened. So Mu Honglu had already seen through everything. The two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Since none of you are willing to speak, I will find someone who is willing to. Mu Honglu smiled coldly. Then he shouted out a name, Chong Kun. As soon as he finished speaking, a panicked voice rang out. It was a strange cry, as if it had suffered a great fright. This panicked voice belonged to none other than Chang Kuan. "Get your ass out here!" Mu Honglu roared in a cold voice. His gaze locked on Chang Kuan's figure. Chang Kuan's figure trembled, and he had an appearance of being badly shaken. When the Kuei Mu army was instantly killed by Mu Honglu, he knew that a disaster was coming. At this moment, his entire body was drenched in cold sweat, and his old face was green. It was obvious that he was extremely frightened. Lord Mu Honglu," Chang Kuan said with a trembling voice as he walked over. "Chang Kuan, your good grandson, Chang Yufeng, is dead. He died at my hands." Mu Honglu did not waste time talking with Chang Kuan. He said directly, "He told me something before he died, and I am very interested in it. Please say it again." What did he say?" Chang Kuan's tongue was spinning in his mouth, and his face was pale with fright. How could everyone not understand when they saw this? Chang Kuan had taken the lead to kneel and admit the identity of the Kuei Mu army. Obviously, he was on the same side as the Kuei Mu army. He must know something. "Chang Kuan, my patience is running out. If you don't say it, it will be Honglu Qianren who will ask you next." Mu Honglu said in a cold voice, and his eyes were deep and stern. I'll say it. Chang Kuan's eyes trembled in fear, and he hurriedly said, "The Kuei Mu army has been planning to seize the position of the main sect for a long time. He made an agreement with the 100 Rivers sect master and the 1,000 Clouds sect master to help him seize the position of the main sect of the 10,000 Mountain sect. After he stabilized the position of the main sect, he divided the entire 10,000 Mountain sect into three. 1/3 for himself, 1/3 for the 100 Rivers sect master, and 1/3 for the 1,000 Clouds sect master." After saying that, Chang Kuan looked at Mu Honglu, knelt down, and begged, "This is the agreement between the Kuei Mu army and the two sect masters. I've said everything. I'm just a pawn, and I'm really being used by them." Mu Honglu smiled coldly and did not care about Chang Kuan at all. Instead, he looked at Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng cold and said with a cold smile, "The two of you are really ruthless." Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng's faces were gloomy, and they did not speak. What Chang Kuan said was true. Dividing the 10,000 Mountain sect into three was the agreement they reached with the Kuei Mu army. If there were no such favorable conditions, they would not come here to help. When the crowd heard Chang Kuan's words, they were completely stunned, and their faces were filled with resentment. Who would have thought that the Kuei Mu army would be so ruthless and sell out the 10,000 Mountain sect for the position of the main sect? If the Kuei Mu army became the sect master, then the territory of the 10,000 Mountain sect would shrink by 2/3. If that was really the case, it would not take long for the 10,000 Mountain sect to become a second-rate force. Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng really had a big appetite. They asked for 1/3 of the 10,000 Mountain sect in one bite. "The two of you, what do you think we should do about this?" Mu Honglu smiled cold and stared at Zhu Dehai and Ji Gufeng with a gloomy gaze. "Mu Honglu, we're all smart people. State your conditions," Ji Gufeng said cold and said straightforwardly. "Sure." Mu Honglu smiled faintly and said, "I'm not as greedy as the two of you. I only want 1/3 of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and 1/3 of the 1,000 Cloud Divine Sect. How about that?" His voice wasn't loud, but it sounded like a clap of thunder when it landed. Mu Honglu directly asked for 1/3 of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and 1/3 of the 1,000 Cloud Mountain Sect. And he said that he was not greedy? If he was greedy, wouldn't he swallow half of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and 1,000 Cloud Divine Sect? "Mu Honglu, you've crossed the line." Zhu Dehai remained silent for a moment, before he finally let out a furious roar. His aura was unleashed, which surged like the ocean and surged in the surrounding space. The crowd was stunned upon seeing this. Their eyes flickered. Looking at Zhu Dehai, it seemed like he was going to fight with his life on the line. One had to admit that Mu Honglu's conditions were too high. No one could accept it. "Are you not willing?" Mu Honglu roared and took a step forward. Sword intent surged from his body and pressed down on Zhu Dehai. Bang! In the next moment, the two violent auras collided in the space, resulting in a muffled sound like metal colliding with stone. In the next second, Zhu Dahai's aura crumbled, and he was forced to retreat a few hundred meters. Zhu Dahai almost fell to the ground. He only managed to stabilize his body after staggering for a while. However, blood flowed out from the corner of his lips. Mu Honglu, Zhu Dahai's face darkened. He was shocked and shocked. He did not expect Mu Honglio's sword aura to be so terrifying. Zhu Dahai, if you still don't agree, then I will use the red stream Thousand Edges for my next move. Mu Honglu stood there like a sharp sword and said cold. Chapter 2554. Embezzlement. Mu Honglu looked at Zhu Dahai coldly, and his eyes were filled with undisguised disdain and threat. When Zhu Dahai heard the words Honglu Thousand Blade, his wild aura stagnated slightly, and then his eyes became hesitant. At this moment, the scene that appeared in his mind was the scene of the Kuei Mu army being killed by a sword. He thought that his strength was stronger than the Kuei Mu army, but he was definitely not to the point of completely crushing them. If he fought with the Kuei Mu army, he would definitely win, but it was impossible to kill them with a single move. More importantly, although he had not really fought with Mu Honglu, he was at a disadvantage in several clashes of aura. At least in terms of aura, Mu Honglu was stronger than him. Mu Honglio's attitude was very tough, which made Zhu Dahai timid. Sect leader Bai Chuan is afraid. Everyone saw that Zhu Dahai was suddenly stunned, and they could tell that he was afraid. Oh no! Ji Gufeng's face suddenly sank when he saw Zhu Dahai's expression. He was more scheming than Zhu Dahai, but the two of them were about the same in terms of strength. Zhu Dahai was afraid at this moment, which meant that once he fought with Mu Honglu, he would most likely lose. In a battle between experts, life and death was only an instant. Zhu Dahai was afraid before the battle. So how could he defeat Mu Honglu? Zhu Dahai, do you want to try? Mu Honglu smiled cold, and he was extremely arrogant. Zhu Dahai stood in the same place, looking at Mu Honglu with a pair of big beads of sweat seeping out his forehead. Mu Honglu, you win. After a long silence, Zhu Dahai finally spoke. Although his eyes were burning with anger, the aura around him was restrained. Obviously, he admitted defeat and accepted Mu Honglio's request. Ji Gufeng's face sank when he saw this, and he was so embarrassed as if he had eaten something disgusting. Ji Gufeng, what about you? Mu Honglu smiled faintly, then turned to look at Ji Gufeng and said in a deep voice. Ji Gufeng's eyes flickered, and he finally nodded. Since Zhu Dahai admitted defeat, if he insisted, he would probably be killed by Mu Honglu. Very good. Mu Honglu laughed and said in a loud voice, since the two sect masters have agreed to my terms, please hand over your sect master badges as collateral. Mu Honglu, Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng growled at the same time, but they did not know what to say. I am indeed a bully. What can you do to me? Mu Honglu said domineeringly. He took a step forward and was extremely arrogant. Hand over the sect leader's token. Hand over the sect leader's token. Everyone from the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect felt their blood boiling as they watched from the side. They all cheered loudly. For so many years, the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect had always been bullied by the 100 Rivers Divine sect and the 1,000 Clouds Divine sect. Now that Mu Honglu had appeared, he actually forced the masters of the two divine sects to hand over their sect master's token. How tyrannical and insolent was that? The disciples of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect felt that they were finally going to release the suffocating feeling in their hearts. At this moment, it was truly satisfying and satisfying. Mu Honglu, you're vicious. Zhu Dahai's face darkened. He roared angrily and threw the sect master's token over. Seeing this, Ji Gufeng had no choice but to hand over the sect master's token. The two sect masters are indeed smart people. You have made a wise choice. Mu Honglu smiled faintly. His laughter was strangely piercing to Zhu Dahai and Ji Gufeng's ears. Let's go. Zhu Dahai growled and left in a flash. The people of the 100 Rivers Divine sect followed and disappeared like a puff of smoke. Ji Gufeng did not say anything. However, His face was extremely ugly as he left with the people of the Thousand Clouds divine sect. These two sect masters had personally come to the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect. Originally, they wanted to take over 1/3 of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect. However, in the end, 1/3 of their sect was taken over by the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect. Mu Honglu had taken their sect master's token and would definitely go to the Thousand Territories Guild. They had no choice but to admit it. In the blink of an eye, the people of the 100 Rivers Divine Sect and the Thousand Clouds Divine Sect had completely disappeared. The atmosphere of the entire martial arts practice field instantly became strange. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Mu Honglu, as if they were anticipating something. After what had just happened, Mu Honglu was no longer a traitor of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect. Instead, he had become the sect's hero. When everyone saw Mu Honglu's strength and unyielding attitude, they couldn't help but think that Mu Honglu should be the sect leader of the 10,000 Weight Mountain sect. In this way, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's identity was very awkward. He was the one who had imprisoned Mu Honglu back then. Moreover, he was Mu Honglu's sworn brother. Many people knew that Mu Honglu was a loyal person. Would he snatch the position of Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's sect master? Honglu, Right at this moment, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 walked out and looked at Mu Honglu with a serious expression. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, now that the matters of the other sects have been settled, it's time to talk about our matters. Mu Honglu's figure moved and landed less than 10 meters away from the Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. He stared at the Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and said in a deep voice. The crowd was shocked when they saw Mu Honglu's actions. They had no idea what was going on. Wasn't Mu Honglu the sworn brother of Purple Bamboo Wolf 7? Why would he call Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 by his name? Judging from Mu Honglu's current expression, he seemed to be extremely angry. Honglu, it seems like you already know. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 frowned. The sharpness in his eyes disappeared, as if he had aged a few decades in an instant. Why? Why did you frame me? Mu Honglu said in a deep voice. His heart was bleeding as he spoke. The crowd was even more dumbfounded. They couldn't understand what was happening in front of them. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 framed. Mu Honglu? Where did that come from? Big brother, what did you do? Purple Bamboo Lu Lan's eyes were trembling as she walked up to Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and asked. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's face darkened. He did not have the courage to speak. My dear sworn brother, since you're not willing to speak, I'll speak on your behalf. Mu Honglu's eyes were cold as he said in a deep voice, It was a trap when you asked me to guard the sacred relic of the sect. You wanted the sacred relic of the sect, but you were afraid that the people of the sect would object. Therefore, you asked me to guard the sacred relic of the sect. After that, you colluded with the people from the outer sect and stole the sacred relic from me. When the sacred relic of the sect was stolen, everyone said that I stole it and took it for myself. I blamed myself for not guarding the sacred relic properly. Therefore, I didn't try to defend myself. Only now do I know that I wasn't the one who stole it. It was you, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. After saying that, Mu Honglu stared at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 like a ferocious beast. When his words fell into everyone's ears, it stirred up 10,000 layers of waves. Everyone's eyes were focused on Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Who would have thought that the person who stole the sacred relic of the sect was none other than the sect leader? Chapter 2555. Red Stream, Sword, Intent. Everyone looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 in disbelief. They could not believe that he was the one who had stolen the sacred relic of the sect. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7, what else do you have to say? Mu Honglu looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 coldly as his face darkened. He knew all of this from Chong Yufeng. Chong Yufeng had unintentionally heard his grandfather Chong Kuan mention it. Chong Kuan was directly involved in the incident back then and was one of the few people who knew the truth. I have nothing to say, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 said in a deep voice, as if he had lost all his faith. He was the one who had stolen the sacred relic of the sect. Back then, he had been in a hurry to increase his strength, so he had set his sights on the sacred relic. However, The sacred relic belonged to the 10,000 Mountain sect and was regarded as the most precious item by the disciples. Even the sect master could not take this sacred relic for himself. Therefore, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 had used Mu Honglu to put on a show and sacrificed him to steal the sacred relic. Now that the truth had been exposed, there was nothing he could do even if he regretted it. Mu Honglu, I'm sorry about what happened back then. I won't complain even if you kill me now, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 said as he lifted his head. Since things had come to this, he would not run away. He could no longer be the sect master, and he admitted that he did not have the strength to be the sect master of the 10,000 Mountain sect. Mu Honglu had been imprisoned in the Heaven Ascension realm for such a long time and was suppressed by the Forbidden Force curse. However, not only had his strength not weakened, but he had also become stronger. However, that was not important now. Mu Honglu was so powerful that it was great news for the entire sect to have him as the sect master of the 10,000 Mountain sect. At least from now on, the 10,000 Mountain sect would no longer be bullied by other sections. I won't kill you. No matter what, you're my sworn brother. Mu Honglu looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 and said, However, I have a question for you. Do you consider me, Mu Honglu, your brother? Of course. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's eyes trembled. You've always been my brother. Really? Mu Honglu sneered and replied with a question. Then let me ask you, could it be that in your eyes, a mere sacred object of the sect is more important than your brother's? Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was stunned, and he was speechless. He had indeed treated Mu Honglu as a brother, but he had indeed framed Mu Honglu. In the entire sect, he was probably the only one who knew what the sacred relic of the sect was. Even Mu Honglu, the guardian of the holy relic, had no idea what the holy relic of the sect was. What happened next was simple. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 stepped down from his position as the sect master, and Mu Honglu became the new sect master. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 did not receive much punishment and was only locked up. After the dust settled, Niet Tian returned to his residence in the 7th sect. Niet Tian. Just as he returned to his room, Fat Cat's voice rang out. Fat, what's the matter? Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked. I feel that the fellow named Mu Honglu has a very special sword essence. Perhaps he can help little June suppress the power of infinite annihilation. Fat Cat frowned and said in a deep voice. Niet Tian's eyes flickered with elation. Really? He had been worrying about how he could help June Ouching suppress the power of infinite annihilation. It had been more than 10 days since June Ouching had been affected by the power of infinite annihilation. If he could not think of a way, June Ouching would be in danger. It should be possible. Fat Cat nodded, but he was not completely confident. When he was fighting against the Kuei Mu army, his sword essence suppressed the power of infinite annihilation very clearly, which is why he was able to kill the Kuei Mu army so easily. Yes, Niet Tian could not help but nod as he recalled the previous scene. In the battle between Mu Honglu and the Kuei Mu army, the former's red current sword essence was indeed very terrifying as it instantly shattered the power of infinite annihilation. But you have to wait a few more days for Mu Honglu to completely break the forbidden force curse in his body. Fat Cat frowned and said again, Yes. Niet Tian nodded heavily. Of course, he knew that Mu Honglio's forbidden force curse had not been completely broken. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Niet Tian came to the outside of the 10,000 Mountains Hall. Before he got close to the hall, he was stopped by 2 guards. The sect leader is discussing important matters in the hall. No one is allowed to enter. A guard looked at Niet Tian and said loudly, Okay, then I will wait outside the hall. Niet Tian smiled faintly and was not in a hurry. Let him come in. But at this moment, a clear and pleasant voice came from the hall. It was Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist. The 2 guards were stunned for a moment, and then stepped back to let Niet Tian enter the hall. Niet Tian stepped into the hall and saw 3 figures from afar. They were all familiar faces, Mu Honglu, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist, and Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. Niet Tian, what's the matter? Mu Honglu looked at Niet Tian and asked directly. Sect leader, I want to ask you for a favor. Niet Tian bowed slightly and told him about the matter of June ouching. Of course. Mu Honglu smiled faintly and said, "Let Miss June ouching out." Nie Tian nodded and took June ouching out of the 9 superbs. He placed her flat on the hall and suspended her in midair. Mu Honglu sensed the aura in June ouching's body and smiled faintly. He said, "So the power used by the Kuei Mu army is called the Force of Annihilation. This lady was hit by the Force of Annihilation, and her life force is draining very quickly. Sect leader, can your sword will break the Force of Annihilation?" Nie Tian asked when he saw Mu Honglio's relaxed expression and his eyes were shining with passion. "Yes." Mu Honglu smiled faintly. Without hesitation, he began to release the sword will in his body and slowly enveloped June ouching. Nie Tian sensed the aura in June ouching's body and was surprised to find that the Force of Annihilation was slowly weakening. About half an hour later, Mu Honglu began to withdraw the sword will around him, but his forehead was already dripping with sweat. "Sect leader, is June ouching okay?" Nie Tian asked hurriedly when he sensed that the Force of Annihilation in June ouching's body had almost disappeared, but she had not woken up yet. "She's fine." Mu Honglu wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "There's not much Force of Annihilation left in her body. When she wakes up, it won't take long for the Force of Annihilation to disappear completely." "Thank you, sect leader." Nie Tian thanked him quickly and sent June ouching into the 9 extremities. "Sect leader, I won't disturb you any further. I'll take my leave." Then, Nie Tian bowed slightly and was ready to leave. Nie Tian, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 called out to Nie Tian at that moment. "Master Purple Bamboo, what's the matter?" Nie Tian's body paused for a moment, and he turned around to ask Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. "You're not a warrior from the Frozen Relic, right?" Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 frowned and asked. He seemed to be thinking about something. "What's wrong?" Nie Tian nodded and asked. At that moment, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was looking at him strangely, which made him nervous. Chapter 25:56. Chapter 25:56. Chapter 25:56. Spiritual Heart, the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods. Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 mention this name. He could not help but stiffen for a few seconds before returning to normal. He did not expect Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to suddenly mention the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods. Furthermore, he knew that he was here for the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods. Nie Tian had indeed mentioned to the others that they were not from the Frozen Relic. However, he did not tell anyone about the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods. How did Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 know about it? Nie Tian, judging from your expression, I think you're here for the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 looked at Nie Tian and laughed strangely. "Sir Purple Bamboo, how did you know?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 smiled and said, "Because there are 2 people with you. Their martial bodies are highly compatible with the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods, so they are especially suitable for merging with the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods." Nie Tian frowned. He immediately knew that Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 was referring to Yu Qingqi and Yuji Wushuang. Just because of that, Nie Tian asked again, it would be too far-fetched for Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to guess that they were here for the 10,000 with spiritual heart based on this reason alone. Nie Tian, since things have come to this, I won't hide it anymore. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 narrowed his eyes and said with a serious expression, "Actually, I tried to merge with the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods before, but I failed. Moreover, my martial body suffered a certain impact, which caused my strength to improve slowly." Nie Tian was shocked when he heard Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's words. He asked in surprise, "You know where the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods is?" He did not expect Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to have merged with the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods before. "Don't panic. Let me tell you slowly." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded and said, "You already know that the red stream used to protect the sacred relic of the 10,000 mountain sect. In fact, the sacred relic is the spiritual heart of 10,000 woods." "What?" Nietion's pupil shrank as he exclaimed. The 10,000 with spiritual heart was actually the sacred object of the 10,000-weight mountain sect. The item that Mu Honglu was protecting back then was the 10,000 with spirit heart. This was something that Nietion had never expected. It turned out that the thing that the purple bamboo wolf 7 stole was the 10,000 with spirit heart. He wanted to fuse with the 10,000 with spirit heart, but he failed. Sigh. Purple bamboo wolf 7 sighed and continued. There are some records about the 10,000 with spiritual heart in the sect. It was mentioned that the myriad with spiritual heart is not something that belongs to the frozen ruins, but to the 9 core realms. When Nietion heard Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 mention the core 9 regions, his eyes narrowed and he asked, "You know about the core 9 regions?" The core 9 realms referred to the 9 realms. Nietion had a map of the Book of 9 Essences in his divine sense. There were countless realms on the map. According to the mysterious Elder Hua, the realms were collectively known as the Infinite Realms, and the 9 realms were the central regions of the Infinite Realms. Hence, they were called the 9 core realms. Nietion had only learned about the 9 core realms not long ago. He did not expect Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to know about the 9 core realms. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded and said, "The 9 core realms are the central regions of the Infinite Realms. The 9 great origins should exist in the 9 core realms. However, because of the special location of the 9 core realms, the plane barrier is compressed by the surrounding realms, and the plane restriction is very strong. Hence, the martial artists there are not very strong." Nietion's eyes widened again. He did not expect Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 to know so much. No wonder the martial artists of the 9 core realms were so much weaker than the martial artists of the frozen ruins. It turned out that they were suppressed by the plane restriction. The 9 core realms were located in the center of the infinite realms, and the plane barrier was indeed under too much pressure. Then, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 looked at Nietion and said with a smile, "If I'm not wrong, you should be from the 9 core realms, right?" Nietion nodded. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 smiled again and said, "When I found out that you came from another realm, my first thought was that you were from the 9 core realms. Moreover, you have 2 martial artists with you. Their martial bodies are very suitable to merge with the 10,000 with spiritual heart. Hence, I guess that you are here for the 10,000 with spiritual heart." Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's words. He did not expect there to be so many things going on. "Lord Purple Bamboo, since you already know that we are here for the 10,000 with spiritual heart, could you please hand it over to us?" Nietion asked straightforwardly after thinking for a while. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 let out a bitter laugh and looked at Mu Honglu with an embarrassed expression. "What happened?" Nietion asked with a frown when he saw Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's reaction. To be honest, the 10,000 with spiritual heart is no longer in the 10,000 layer mountain sect. Mu Honglu stepped forward and said in a deep voice. Nietion was stunned. His expression changed drastically as he asked, "Why?" Mu Honglu looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7. The latter let out a long sigh and said, "It's all because of me. When I snatched the 10,000 with spiritual heart back then, I hired 2 helpers. After that, I failed to merge with the 10,000 with spiritual heart, and my martial body was injured. The 2 of them took the 10,000 with spiritual heart away when I was injured." This, Nietion was taken aback and didn't know what to say. Initially, he thought he could obtain the 10,000 with spiritual heart effortlessly. However, he did not expect something like this to happen again. Immediately afterwards, Nietion calmed himself down and asked in a grim voice, "Lord Purple Bamboo, who was the one who took the spirit heart of Myriad Wood? I don't know where they came from either." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 shook his head. He then looked at Mu Honglu and asked, "Honglu, you fought with them before. Can you tell who they are?" Mu Honglu's eyes darkened. He then fell into deep thought and tried his best to recall what happened back then. He clearly remembered that the 2 people who fought with him were very strange. They were lying in coffins, as if the coffins were some kind of terrifying weapon that was extremely ferocious. As he thought about it, he described the scene of the battle back then. The people who use coffins as weapons. Could it be? Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 thought of something after hearing Mu Honglio's words. His eyes flickered as he said name. Ghoul 13 coffins. Ghoul 13 coffins. Nye Tian's eyes flickered, and his expression changed slightly when he heard the name. One could tell from the name that it was an extremely ferocious organization. Using coffins as weapons was not something that an ordinary person would do. Ghoul 13 coffins. Could it be the Ghoul Corpse cult in the Shadow Mountain? Mu Honglio's eyes flickered with a hint of unconcealable fear. They should be from the Ghoul 13 coffins. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 frowned and said, "The two people I came into contact with carried a corpse aura. It's not an aura that a living person should have. Apart from the Ghoul 13 coffins, I can't think of anyone else who would have such an aura." Chapter 25:57. Chapter 25:57. Chapter 25:57. The Ghoul 13 coffins. Mu Honglu and the other two fell silent when Nye Tian asked about the Ghoul 13 coffins. Their faces were filled with unconcealable fear. Nye Tian frowned and asked again, "Is the Ghoul 13 coffins very scary?" Nye Tian, you must get the All Woods spiritual heart, right? Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 asked as he looked at Nye Tian. Yes. Nye Tian nodded. The All Woods spiritual heart was not only the promise he made to the Yu clan's patriarch, but it was also the key to saving his mother, Chiwu Yunxiu. He must get the All Woods spiritual heart, no matter how difficult it was. All right. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded and said, "If that's the case, I'll tell you about the Ghoul 13 coffins." He knew that Nye Tian was the kind of person who would never back down. It was useless to persuade him now. "Please go ahead, Lord Purple Bamboo." Nye Tian nodded and looked at Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 while listening attentively. Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded and said, "In the frozen ruins, other than the area under the jurisdiction of the seven sects, there's a dangerous place called the Shadow Mountain. Legend has it that the Shadow Mountain was once a battlefield in the ancient times. It's a burial ground for hundreds of millions of martial artists. The Shadow Mountain is filled with energy and never sees the sun. It's a dangerous place. However, legend has it that the Shadow Mountain has many sacred weapons from the ancient times. There are also various lost martial skills and inheritances from the ancient times. That's why many adventurers favor the Shadow Mountain. However, most of the people who enter the Shadow Mountain die inside. Only a small number of people survive, but they become zombies that are neither human nor ghost." Upon hearing this, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown and interrupt. "How strange." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded and continued. "There's an evil organization in the Shadow Mountain. The martial artists of this organization use coffins as weapons and the zombies as slaves. Among them, the owners of 13 coffins are very powerful, so this organization is called the Ghoul Corpse 13 coffins. The seven great sects have joined forces 3 times to go deep into the Shadow Mountain to encircle the Ghoul Corpse 13 coffins, but all of them ended in failure. After that, the 7 great sects and the people of the Ghost Corpse 13 coffins reached an agreement not to attack each other. However, everything within 100,000 li of Shadow Mountain is controlled by the Ghoul 13 coffins." At this point, Purple Bamboo Wolf 7's eyes suddenly flickered, and he said, "Rumor has it that there's a coffin master among the 13 ghoul corpses that is related to the Myriad Domain Guild." Myriad Domain Guild? Nye Tian stared blankly for a moment before asking in astonishment, "What kind of organization is that?" "Oh, the Myriad Domain Guild is a powerful organization that controls the Myriad Domain. In the eyes of the frozen ruins, 7 great sects, they're like ants." Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 nodded and smiled bitterly. "Controlling 10,000 territories." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and he was quite surprised. If what Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 said was true, then the Myriad Domain Guild was indeed too powerful. It was terrifying to control the entire Myriad Domain. However, the strange thing was that when Nye Tian was in the 9 Great Domains, he had never heard of the Myriad Domain Guild. However, when he thought about it, it was normal. When he was in the 9 Great Domains, he didn't even know about the Myriad Domain Guild. From Purple Bamboo Wolf Seven's words, the Ghoul Corp's 13 Coffins was indeed a very powerful organization. Even the 7 great sects had joined forces and failed to eliminate this organization. One could imagine how powerful it was. At this moment, Nietian looked at Mu Honglu and asked, "Lord Sect Leader, do you still remember the characteristics of the 2 people you fought with?" Mu Honglu frowned and said, "Although I fought with them, they were lying in the coffins and didn't show their true faces. I only remember that one of the coffins had 9 white bone chains around it, and it had a very evil aura. As for the other coffin, it was even weirder. Every time it attacked, it would let out a mournful cry. It sounded like the cry of a baby, but it was very terrifying. It made people feel uneasy after listening to it." Nietian frowned when he heard Mu Honglio's words, and his expression changed slightly. The people of the Ghoul Corp's 13 coffins were indeed weirder than the other. "I know." At this moment, Purple Bamboo Wolf Seven's beautiful eyes trembled, and she said, "The 2 people you're talking about should be the 9-bone coffin and the ominous coffin of thousands of babies of the Ghoul Corp's 13 coffins. 9-bone coffin, the ominous coffin of thousands of babies." Nietian's eyes trembled when he heard these 2 names. Just from the names, one could tell how evil the 2 coffins were. "Yes." Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist nodded her head and continued. "According to the rumors, the 9-bone coffin was forged from the bones of 9 experts at the pinnacle of the godly state. The 9 bone chains are actually the spines of 9 experts at the pinnacle of the godly state. They're called the divine spine. The 9 peak immortal state warriors were tortured inhumanely when they were alive, which caused their bodies to be filled with evil aura. Then, the 9 divine spine were refined using a special method to increase the evil aura. Finally, a terrifying talisman was added to the divine spine so that the divine spine could be lengthened, shortened, and thickened. Rumor has it that when one is hit by the divine spine, the power in one's body will be attacked by the evil aura and become chaotic. It's extremely terrifying. Hearing Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist words, Nietian couldn't help but frown, and his heart sank. Using the bones of peak immortal state warriors to make a coffin was definitely not something that an ordinary person could do. Moreover, they had to torture 9 peak immortal state warriors and use all kinds of methods to increase the evil aura. It was an extremely cruel method. What about the coffins of thousands of babies? Nietian took a deep breath to calm himself down and continued asking. The method of refining the coffins of thousands of babies is even crueler than the 9-bone coffin. At this moment, Purple Bamboo Flowing Mist's pretty face became gloomy. She said, "The 10,000 infant ominous coffin is called the 10,000 infant coffin because it is made from the dragon bones of 10,000 infants. These 10,000 babies must be born in a year, a month, and a day. The babies born at that time are filled with extreme chi, so they're called extreme infants. Every extreme infant cannot last 100 days, because after 100 days, the extreme chi of the extreme infant will slowly dissipate. The bones and blood of 10,000 extreme infants that are less than 100 days old are extracted and refined into the coffins of thousands of babies using the extreme method. So cruel." When Nietian heard this, his eyes trembled and he growled. His eyes were filled with unconcealable anger. He had fought his way up from the 3,000 small worlds to where he was now, and he had seen countless vicious and merciless people. However, compared to the people who refined the 9-bone coffin and the coffins of thousands of babies, those people could be considered kind. A mere coffin of thousands of babies actually required 10,000 babies that were less than 100 days old to make. This was simply despicable. In the process of refining the coffins of thousands of babies, who knew how many babies would have to be killed? It was likely that refining a coffin of thousands of babies would require the lives of tens or even hundreds of thousands of babies. Chapter 2558. A mad dog barking Nietian was a bit agitated by Violet Bamboo Current's words, and it took him a while to calm down. "Nietian, do you still want to go look for the 13 ghoul coffins?" Violet Bamboo Current asked, frowning when she saw that Nye Tian had turned cold. Of course I will. Of course I will. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. If the 13 ghoul coffins are so terrifying, then I have to see for myself. Nye Tian. At this moment, Mu Honglu spoke. He glanced at Nye Tian and said, I know you're very angry, and you want to take back the wood spirit heart. But forgive me for being blunt, but given your current strength, there's no way you can fight the 13 ghoul coffins. The two people I fought back then were both at the half-saint realm. If you ran into them, you'd be killed in an instant. Even I wouldn't be able to make it out alive if I went into the Shadowless Mountain on my own. Nye Tian frowned. He knew that Mu Honglu was worried about him, but he still said, Lord Sect Lord, there's no need to say anything. I know what I'm doing. Mu Honglu's expression darkened. Nye Tian, I suggest you stay in the Myriad Mountain sect for a while. I can sense that your aura is full, and it won't be long before you reach the peak paramount god level. Considering your talent, once you reach the peak paramount god level, your battle prowess will be comparable to peak god realm experts. At that time, I'll be able to take care of the sect's affairs, and I'll go with you. What do you think? Nye Tian looked at Mu Honglu and said with a faint smile, Sect Master, thank you for your kindness, but I'm afraid I'll have to thank you. But I have to leave now. Mu Honglu's suggestion was good, but Nye Tian couldn't agree to it. He didn't have time to waste. He had to find a myriad with spirit heart as soon as possible. Mu Honglu's eyes narrowed as he sensed the determination in Nye Tian's eyes. He knew that Nye Tian had made up his mind, so he didn't try to persuade him to stay. Then, Nye Tian did not stay for long and left the hall after a while. 3 days later, when Jun Aoqing had more or less recovered, Nye Tian and the others left the 10,000 Layer Mountain sect and headed towards the Shadow Mountain. The Shadow Mountain was located in the extreme north of the frozen ruins. Nye Tian and the others trekked day and night for half a month and finally came to the outskirts of the Shady Mountain. After passing through this mountain range, we will reach the Shady Mountain. Nye Tian looked at the deep mountain range before him and said with a faint smile. Although they had been walking for half a month, Nye Tian and the others were not too tired. After a short rest, Nye Tian stood up again and walked towards the Shady Mountain. Although they had been running for half a month, Nye Tian could feel the aura in his body becoming more and more vigorous, as if he could break through to the peak of the paramount god realm at any time. He felt that as long as there were no accidents, he would definitely break through to the peak of the paramount god realm in half a month. After a while, Nye Tian and the others entered the outskirts of the Shady Mountain. There were many people in the dense forest of the mountain range, and many of them were strong experts. Nye Tian casually sensed the surroundings and found that the weaker warriors were at the early stage of the paramount god realm, and the stronger ones were at the peak of the paramount god realm. He could even sense the presence of peak god realm warriors in the surroundings. Most of these martial artists were traveling in groups. They were probably adventurers heading to the Shady Mountain, and they knew how dangerous it was, so they formed groups to look out for each other. Yu Qingqi looked around and asked Nye Tian in a low voice, Lord Nye Tian, should we find a team to go with us? No need. Nye Tian smiled faintly, rejecting Yu Qingqi's suggestion. There were already 4 of them in their group, and if they went with another team, they would be a bigger target. Moreover, his goal was different from the others. He was going for the myriad with spirit heart. But at this moment, a handsome young man walked over, walking straight towards Jun Aoqing. His eyes kept moving up and down Jun Aoqing's body, and his mouth curved into a smile. Miss, are you going to the Shady Mountain? Jun Aoqing's beautiful eyes swept over the man, but she didn't say anything and walked straight ahead. The handsome young man was ignored, and his face darkened. Then he laughed and said, Miss, the Shady Mountain is a dangerous place. If you follow these useless people, I'm afraid you won't even be able to enter the Shady Mountain and will die tragically in the hands of the beasts. Why don't you follow me? I promise to let you enter the Shady Mountain, and you will get the sage's inheritance as you wish. Jun Aoqing frowned, but she still ignored the young man. Instead, she walked to Nye Tian's side and held his arm with both of her hands. The handsome young man saw this, and his face darkened. cold light flashed in his eyes, and he looked at June, ouching coldly. He growled, "Didn't you hear me talking to you?" June, ouching, still ignored the handsome young man, and she hugged Tian's arm even tighter. "I didn't hear anything, but I heard a mad dog barking here." At this time, the handsome young man wanted to speak again, but Tian spoke before he could. His eyes were full of disdain. "Brat, what did you say?" The handsome young man's face suddenly changed. The coldness in his eyes became sharper, and he said in a deep voice, "Say it again if you have the guts. A mad dog barking? Are you addicted to it?" Tian took a step forward. His entire body's sword momentum surged up and surged in the air. The trees in the surrounding 10,000 meters directly fell down as if they were blown by a violent wind. "You?" The handsome young man felt the violent sword momentum rushing toward him. His face turned pale, and he was suddenly speechless. "Get lost," Tian growled, and didn't even look at the handsome young man. The handsome young man gulped down his saliva. His face turned as red as an eggplant. He retreated a few steps, turned around, and ran away. "What mad dog?" Tianling laughed and ignored him, continuing to move forward. Then, Tian and the others walked toward the depths of the mountain range. They gradually felt that the yin qi in the air was getting heavier. Before long, they were at the edge of a narrow gorge. Yu Qingqi pulled out a map and said, "Exalted Tian, according to the map, once we pass through this gorge, we'll reach the real Shady Mountains." "What?" Tian frowned, and his expression flickered. A moment later, a dozen black-garbed figures appeared and surrounded Tian and the others. All of them were peak paramount gods, but their auras were very strange and intense. However, their auras were very strange and heavy with yin energy. To be more precise, it should be a type of corpse energy. Tian's gaze swept over the black-garbed men, and then came to rest on a familiar face. It was none other than the mad dog he had just scared away, the handsome young man. The handsome young man chuckled coldly, glaring at Tian with killing intent. "I finally found you, you brat." The corner of Tian's mouth curled up into a cold smile, and he didn't seem the least bit afraid. "Exalted Tian," Yu Qingqi said, sounding a bit alarmed. "Do you think there's something wrong with these black-garbed men?" Tian nodded. Looking more closely at the black-garbed men, he realized that their eyes were lifeless and lifeless, almost as if they were dead. "Don't tell me this is." All of a sudden, Tian realized something, and his eyes widened. Chapter 25:59. Corpse Aura Corpse. Hearing Fat Cat's voice, Tian's gaze turned cold and his heart sank. He was not unfamiliar with these two words. Moreover, this was the name he wanted to say just now. Before coming to Shadow Mountain, Tian had heard purple bamboo, flowing mist, and the others mention the name corpse. Most of the people who entered Shadow Mountain died inside. Only an extremely small number of people survived, but they became zombies that were neither human nor ghost. The so-called corpse was a type of zombie that maintained human form. Tian looked at the dozens of martial artists in front of him. Although their physical bodies were intact and maintained a human form, their eyes were dull and lifeless, as if they were dead people. Moreover, there was a layer of gray aura circulating around their bodies. It was clearly corpse aura. "Lord Tian, why don't these people in black have the aura of a living person? Instead, they're releasing a thick corpse aura." Yu Qingqi looked at the dozens of corpse martial artists, and his eyes could not help but tremble. It was obvious that he was extremely shocked. "Because they are all zombies," Tian said in a deep voice. His gaze swept across all the zombies and finally locked onto the handsome young man. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Since this handsome young man could control so many zombies, it proved that he had an unusual relationship with Shadow Mountain. Tian was just worrying about how to enter Shadow Mountain, and this idiot came to him. "Brat, I can tell that you know quite a lot. You can actually tell that these people around me are all corpse slaves." The handsome young man was stared at by Tian, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, he sneered and provoked. "Brat, you still have a chance to live now." Quickly kneel on the ground and kowtow to this young master to beg for mercy. Then give a little girl beside you to this young master. If this young master is in a good mood, he might consider sparing your dog life." The handsome young man smiled coldly, as if he was certain that he had Nye Tian in his hands. "Is that so?" Nye Tianling sneered and took a step forward. Sword aura burst out from his body, and he said arrogantly, "I have a chance to live, but you don't." Courting death. Sensing Nye Tian's killing intent, the handsome young man was instantly enraged. He roared in a low voice, "Kill them." The dozens of zombies received the order in an instant. Their aura surged, and streams of corpse chi were released, connecting into one. The surrounding space was filled with a strong corpse chi, like a thick fog, suffocating people. Nye Tian narrowed his eyes slightly. He immediately sensed that these corpses were releasing corpse chi and had condensed into a corpse chi formation that was similar to a barrier. This corpse chi array didn't seem to be weak. The corpse chi in the array grew thicker and thicker, making Nye Tian and the others feel a strong pressure. Nye Tian, the array eyes on the left, and Ryder on the right. Attack at the same time. At that moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out, reminding Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded solemnly, after which the sword will around his body surged crazily as he slashed out with his sword. The sword will split into two, condensing into two sword shadows that whistled out at the same time. Boom! Boom! The two sword shadows fell and directly bombarded the corpse chi array eyes on the left and right, triggering a terrifying roar. The corpse chi array was impacted and immediately became shaky. 8 barren slashes. Seeing this, Nye Tian slashed out with his sword again. The sword shadows bombarded the array eyes. An explosive roar was heard in the air, and the corpse chi array was broken. How is this possible? The handsome young man was stunned by the scene in front of him and exclaimed in shock. He didn't expect Nye Tian to be so powerful. With such a casual attack, the corpse chi array collapsed. Kill this young man. In the next moment, the handsome young man regained his composure and growled. More than a dozen corpse warriors sprang into action at the same time and launched attacks. More than a dozen powerful attacks shot towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the corner of his lips curled up into a cold smile. Star slashes. He growled, and the sword will around his body surged. It was as hard as a wild beast, and it slaughtered in all directions. Boom! 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 In the void, there was a continuous, thunderous explosion. Countless forces collided wantonly. The trees within 10,000 meters were all destroyed, the ground cracked, and rocks were sent flying. Nye Tian's figure was as swift as a rainbow. He directly slashed out with his sword. The sword shadow was like a dragon, falling toward a zombie. Bang! The moment the sword shadow fell, the zombie's body shook and directly exploded into a bloody light. Damn it! How can this young man be so strong? Seeing that Nye Tian was so powerful, the handsome young man knew something was wrong. He then moved and prepared to leave. Stop him! Seeing that the handsome young man wanted to escape, Nye Tian quickly growled. In an instant, a figure flew like a rainbow and directly landed in front of the handsome young man. It was Jun Ouching. You? The handsome young man looked at Jun Ouching. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile, and said, "Just you want to. You're acting like a snob," Yang Qi said. "I'll take out one of your eyes first." However, before he could finish speaking, Jun Ouching let out a growl, and a sword shadow slashed out. The handsome young man's eye was now a bloody hole, and half of his face was now a bloody mess. What's going on? The handsome young man was aghast, looking at Jun Ouching in horror. He was a peak paramount god, whereas Jun Ouching was only a late paramount god. How could she have taken out one of his eyes so easily? Bam! Bam! Bang! At that moment, 3 muffled noises came from the other side at the same time, and 3 more zombies exploded into bloody light again. Ninth brother killed them. Yu Qingqi shouted at Yu Shuang as he fought with a zombie. All right, Yu Shuang said, nodding. Clenching his hand into a fist, he punched out, and sent one of the zombies flying. In just a blink of an eye, more than a dozen zombies were killed by Nietian and the others. They were either dead or crippled. The handsome young man's face was covered with shock. His eyes were trembling, and his fear was written all over his face. How can you people be so strong? He had thought that Nietian and the others were just a bunch of imposters who he could bully and provoke at will. Only now did he realize that he had run into some freaks. Humph. Nietianling chuckled. His eyes shone with a cold light as he stared at the handsome young man. If you don't want to die, he said coldly, you'd better listen carefully. Whatever I ask, you'll answer. If they don't satisfy me, then I'll have to apologize. Well, what do you want? The handsome young man looked at Nietian, his teeth chattering. It's simple. I just want to ask you a few questions. Nietian smiled faintly, but the curve of his lips was extremely cold. He asked directly, what's your name? Yi Chun. Yi Chun's eyes flickered, and he subconsciously shrank back. Yi Chun. Very good. Nietian smiled faintly, then asked, these zombies are your subordinates, right? Yes. Yi Chun nodded, then shook his head. No, they're not my subordinates. Chapter 2560. In Valley Yi Chun felt Nietian's anger and paled in fright. He covered his destroyed eye and said, these corpses are my uncle's subordinates. I only borrowed them temporarily. Your uncle's subordinates? Nietian was stunned and asked, what about your uncle? When Yi Chun heard Nietian ask about his uncle, his expression immediately changed. I avoided Nietian's gaze as he begged, Lord, please let me go. If these corpses die, then they die. I will not seek revenge on you. Nietian's face sank, and he said Yi Chun in a cold voice, Yi Chun, since you cannot answer my question, then you can only die. When Yi Chun heard Nietian say the word die, his pupils constricted in fright. He quickly said, my lord, I'm not telling you for your own good. My uncle, he worked for the Ghoul 13 coffins. It is best if you do not provoke him. When Nietian heard the name of the Ghoul 13 coffins, his gaze instantly turned fervent. He took a step forward, and the sword aura in his body surged, pressuring Yi Chun. He said, I will give you one last chance to speak. If I do not hear the answer I want, you are dead for sure. Yi Chun said that his uncle worked for the Ghoul 13 coffins. How could this not make Nietian excited? He was looking for the Ghoul 13 coffins. I'll speak. When Yi Chun saw that Nietian was not afraid after hearing about the Ghoul 13 coffins, he became even more interested. Yi Chun was scared out of his wits. He said, my uncle is in a valley tens of kilometers away from here. When Nietian saw Yi Chun speak, he smiled faintly and asked directly, how many people are there with your uncle? Where are they going? Yi Chun's eyes flickered slightly. He looked at Nietian with a horrified expression. He could not understand why Nietian was so interested in his uncle. Speak. Nietian roared when he saw Yi Chun in a daze. I'll talk. Yi Chun paled in fright. He quickly said, Uncle has more than 40 corpse warriors and 4 peak paramount god guards by his side. They received orders from the Ghoul 13 coffins to escort a batch of things to the Shadow Mountain. This time, Yi Chun did not dare to hide anything, revealing everything in one go. What is it? Nietian frowned and asked in a deep voice. More than 40 zombies, a peak paramount god bodyguard, and an expert of unknown strength. It was a terrifying lineup. With such a lineup, the item they were escorting would definitely be extraordinary. I don't know. Yi Chun shook his head in shock. He was afraid that Nietian would really kill him. You really don't know? Nietianling smiled, his eyes full of murderous intent. Sir, please don't kill me. I really don't know. Yi Chun shook his head repeatedly. He was so frightened that he directly knelt before Nietian. His entire body trembled uncontrollably. Nietian frowned, his expression sullen. Judging from Yi Chun's expression, he really didn't know what his uncle was escorting. However, Nietian guessed that since so many experts were escorting it, it would definitely be something extraordinary. Stand up. Let's go, Nietian said to Yi Chun after thinking for a while. Go where? Yi Chun was stunned, his face filled with confusion. I'm going to find your uncle, Nietian said with a grim smile. his face filled with killing intent. Yichen was stunned once again. He did not expect that Nietian would actually dare to find his uncle. From his point of view, this was no different from throwing his life away. Even now, he could not understand what Nietian was trying to do. After a while, under Yi Chen's lead, Nietian and the others arrived at a valley. What a heavy Yin-Chi! Before entering the valley, Nietian felt an extremely dense Yin-Chi rushing at him. He could not help but frown. However, the strange thing was that he did not sense any other auras in the valley. There is no one in the valley? Jun Ouching frowned and asked Nietian. Nietian nodded slightly. Then, his figure flashed, and he flew towards the valley. When he entered the valley, there was no one around. However, there were many messy footprints on the ground. Furthermore, the Yin-Chi in the air was very dense, making it difficult for him to breathe. At this moment, the others also entered the valley. Lord Nietian, the Yin-Chi here is very dense, Yu Qingqi said with a frown as he arrived beside Nietian. Nietian nodded and carefully sensed everything in the valley. Yichen was right. His uncle and the others should have stayed in the valley to rest. However, from the footprints on the ground, Yichen's uncle had left for some time. However, the Yin-Chi in the valley was very dense and did not dissipate. This made Nietian very suspicious. Just what was it that caused the Yin-Chi to be so dense? After carefully sensing the entire valley, aside from the dense Yin-Chi, there were no other abnormalities. Nietian frowned and arrived beside Yichen. He asked, Yichen, did your uncle and the others carry anything conspicuous on them? No. Yichen's eyes flickered as he shook his head. Nietian frowned and nodded slightly. He felt that the people who were escorting the items would not expose their items. They must have stored them in their spatial rings. Nya, Lord Nya. But at this moment, Yichen suddenly thought of something and said, My uncle carries a small box with him. That box is sealed with some kind of talisman. My uncle keeps the box in a space ring, but every once in a while, he will take it out to look at it. A box sealed with talisman? When Nietian heard Yichen's words, he could not help but frown. His expression became extremely gloomy. He then asked, Is the box filled with Yin-Chi? Yes. Yichen nodded and said, My uncle did not let anyone near the box. He kept the box by his side at all times. He did not even let anyone look at it. Nietian frowned and fell in a deep thought. He guessed that the item that Yichen's uncle was escorting should be in the box. As for what was in the box, he could not guess. At this moment, Yichen looked at Nietian and asked carefully, Lord Nya, I have told you everything I know. Can I leave now? Leave? Nietian laughed and said, Before you find your uncle, don't even think about taking half a step out of here. Yichen looked at Nietian and his heart sank. His face was filled with horror, and he did not dare to say anything more. After that, Nietian and the others left the valley. They passed through a long and narrow valley and arrived at the real Shady Mountain. I did not expect there to be a small town here. Nietian looked in front of him and could not help but laugh. In front of them was an endless dark mountain range. However, at the foot of the mountain was a wide village. The small village was very long and narrow along the Shady Mountain. From a distance, it looked quite prosperous. Lord Nya, this is Shady City. Many cultivators will rest here before entering the Shady Mountain. I believe my uncle and the others should rest here as well. Yichen walked to Nietian's side and took the initiative to speak. Chapter 2561. Number 1 under Heaven Shadow City was the last peaceful place before entering the Shadow Mountain. Everyone who entered the Shadow City would choose to rest in the Shadow City before entering the Shadow Mountain. Nietian and the others entered the Shadow City and walked on the narrow street. It was not accurate to call him Main Street. It was just a road that had been cleared of miscellaneous stones. There were people passing by on the street, and they seemed to be in a hurry. Nietian sensed the aura of the people around him, trying to find someone with Yin-Chi. However, to his disappointment, the aura of the people around him was very normal. There was no one with strong Yin energy. The Shady City is built on a mountain, and the terrain is long and narrow. It will take a long time to walk through such a long and narrow city. Nye Tian frowned and said in his heart, it was indeed not a good idea to continue searching like this. It would only be a waste of time. Yi Chun, do you and your uncle come to Shadow City often? Thinking of this, Nye Tian could not help but look at Yi Chun and ask coldly, yes, I've been here a few times. Although Yi Chun had already experienced how terrifying Nye Tian was, he still felt fear. His lips trembled as he spoke. Very good. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth curved into a faint smile, and he said, then you must know where your uncle will stay after coming to Shadow City. I don't know, Yi Chun said in horror as his eyes trembled. You don't know? Nye Tianling laughed and said, since you don't know, then there's no need for you to continue living. As he spoke, he took a step forward. His eyes were extremely cold and murderous. Wait a moment. Yi Chun was startled when he saw that Nye Tian really wanted to kill him. He quickly said, let me think. In fact, he also hoped to find his uncle, Yi Long, so that he could borrow the latter's power to shake off Nye Tian. However, he really didn't know where Yi Long was. Have you thought of something? Nye Tian asked with a cold smile, when Yi Chun remained silent for a long time. I remember now. Yi Chun suddenly let out a strange cry and said, Uncle once brought me to the shady arena. Maybe we can find him there. Okay, take us there now. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said without hesitation. Yi Chun nodded like a rattle drum as he led the way. Half an hour later, Nye Tian and the others arrived at a spacious area. Looking around, there was a huge square in front of them. The surrounding walls were extremely tall, standing tall in the wilderness, appearing ancient and desolate. Lord Nye, this is the shady arena, Yi Chun said as he pointed at the circular plaza in front. Nye Tian nodded and gestured for Yu Qingqi to keep a close eye on Yi Chun. As long as Yi Chun made any strange movements, they would immediately kill him. Following that, Nye Tian and the others entered the arena. There were places like martial arenas everywhere. To put it bluntly, it was a place where warriors fought. It could be for some benefits, or it could be a life and death battle. However, the battles in the shady arena were not a competition for benefits, nor were they a life and death battle. Instead, they were for another purpose, to choose teammates. Everyone knew about the infamy of the Shady Mountain. Even some fugitives had to be extremely careful when entering the Shady Mountain. Most people who entered the Shadow Mountain would form a team and enter the Shadow Mountain in the form of a team to explore. When choosing teammates, of course, they had to choose the strongest. The Shady Arena was a place to test the strength of warriors. Some of the larger teams would choose their members based on their achievements in the arena. As soon as Nye Tian and the others entered the arena, they heard someone shouting, "The Gray Eagle Army is still missing 2 spots. If anyone wants to sign up, hurry up and get on the arena." Nye Tian looked over and saw a burly cultivator standing on the arena. He was a late-stage paramount god, not too weak, but definitely not too strong either. This tall and sturdy martial artist was a member of the Gray Eagle Army. If anyone wanted to join the Gray Eagle Army, they just had to go up the stage and defeat this martial artist to successfully join. Nye Tian smiled faintly. He glanced at the dozens of martial artists of the Goshawk Corps and smiled faintly. This so-called army was far too weak. They only had 1 peak paramount god, and the rest were all late-stage paramount gods. Nye Tian reckoned that even Yu Qingqi, the weakest among them, could easily take on the entire Great Eagle Army. "Brother, my name is Zhang Ziao, and I'm from the Gray Eagle Army. I see you're quite strong. Are you interested in joining our Gray Eagle Army?" At this moment, the person from the Goshawk Corps took the initiative to approach Nye Tian and asked with a smile, "I'm not interested." Nye Tian's reply was very cold and straightforward. When Zhang Ziao saw Nye Tian's decisive refusal, his smile turned grim. "You're just a piece of late-stage paramount god trash. What are you trying to do?" he said in a cold voice. Nye Tian shook his head and ignored Zhang Ziao, continuing on his way. The entire martial arts arena was bustling with noise. All the armies were recruiting soldiers and buying horses, preparing to enter the Shadow Mountain. Each and every one of the army's shouts were filled with confidence and confidence in their own army. However, at that moment, An almost inaudible voice entered Nietion's ears. Heavens, there are still 10 slots for the number 1 army under heaven. Is there anyone who wants to join? The voice wasn't loud, but it sounded very nervous. Taken aback, Nietion looked in the direction of the voice and saw a girl about 15 or 16 years old standing there shyly. What was even stranger was that the girl looked like an ordinary girl and seemed to be only in the origin spirit realm. Nietion couldn't help but frown at the sight. In the origin spirit realm, cultivators in the origin spirit realm were practically trash. It was hard to imagine how this girl had managed to get here. Most amusing of all, the girl's army had a very resounding name. Number 1 army under heaven. Nietion shook his head and smiled. Taking it as a joke, he turned and walked off in another direction. Would you be interested in joining the number 1 army under heaven? However, that was when a voice rang out, and a figure appeared in front of Nietion like a ghost. The figure descended to a place less than 10 meters away from Nietion. Nietion couldn't help but frown at the sight of the person in front of him. The figure in front of him was very young, with handsome features and a heroic air. Nietion estimated that the man was under 1,000 years old, perhaps only a few hundred years old. But his strength was extremely shocking. He had actually reached the peak of the paramount god realm. Look at how surprised you are. You must be wondering how someone as young as me could be so strong. Are you saying in your heart that this guy is the most talented person I've ever seen? Just as Nietion found it hard to conceal his astonishment, the person in front of him spoke with a narcissistic smile on his face. Chapter 2562. Chapter 2562. Chapter 2562. Powerful martial body. Tion responded to the person in front of him indifferently. The surprise on his face had long disappeared and was replaced by calmness. The guy standing in front of him was top-notch in strength and talent, but he was far from being the strongest. Nietion had seen countless martial arts geniuses, and it was impossible for this guy to rank first. At least, Nietion thought that his talent was not weaker than the person in front of him. Top 5. The person looked at Nietion and suddenly screamed, "Are you kidding me? With my talent, I can only be in the top 5? Nietion shook his head slightly and did not want to talk nonsense with this person anymore. He said, "If you have nothing else, please step aside." Don't. The person did not want to let Nietion leave. He said, "Brother, I see that your strength and talent are not bad. Why don't you join my world's number 1 army? I can let you be the deputy commander. How about it?" Deputy commander? Nietion laughed and looked at the person. Then, he looked at the girl who did not have the courage to shout and asked, "Your world's number 1 army only has the 2 of you, right? If you join, there will be 3 of us." The person chuckled and said, "As long as the 3 of us work together, not to mention Shady Mountain, even the endless demon territory can be trampled to pieces." The corner of Nietion's mouth curled up. He was speechless. This guy's talent and strength were top-notch, but his confidence was too top-notch. The so-called world's number 1 army only had 2 people, and one of them was only an origin spirit realm girl. "Sorry, we are not interested." At this time, before Nietion could speak, Jun Ouching could not stand it anymore and said cold, "Wow." That guy immediately turned his gaze to Jun Ouching and actually let out a strange cry. Then his gaze trembled and he laughed loudly. Another genius martial artist, and a super beauty at that. Nietion frowned, his face a little gloomy. Fortunately, the way this guy looked at Jun Ouching was normal, without any vulgar intention. "Let's go," Nietion said solemnly. He turned around and prepared to leave. "Stop." However, that person was unwilling to give up. He suddenly raised his voice and roared, "What do you want?" Nietion's body froze as he turned around to look at the other party. He really didn't have time to waste. If this fellow continued to pester him endlessly, then don't blame him for being impolite. "Brother, let's discuss this properly." Seeing that Nietion was a little angry, the man chuckled and put on a mischievous smile. He said, "Name your condition. What will it take for you to join number 1 under heaven?" Nietion frowned and looked at Yu Ji Wushuang. Then he said to the man, "You and my friend will exchange a punch. You will only use the power of your martial body. If you can still stand after this punch, then we will talk about joining number one under heaven. All right, all right, all right. Come on. The man looked at Ji Wu Shuang and said happily with a smile. Wu Shuang, exchange a punch with him. Be careful not to hurt him. Nie Tian looked at Ji Wu Shuang and said calmly. Ji Wu Shuang nodded, full of confidence. Then, Ji Wu Shuang and the man stood together. There was only a distance of about 10 meters between them. Big brother Feng Qi, be careful. At that moment, the little girl shouted in a low voice. It was obvious that she was worried about Feng Qi, so, this guy's name is Feng Qi. Nie Tian frowned slightly and thought to himself, big guy, punch me. Feng Qi looked at Ji Wu Shuang and smiled calmly. He actually looked very calm. Ji Wu Shuang glanced at Nie Tian, who nodded at him. Only then did Ji Wu Shuang move and launch a punch. Ji Wu Shuang did not use any martial arts skills in this punch. He simply punched out. However, there was a whistling sound in the air, and a sharp fish shadow appeared, pressing towards Feng Qi. Good timing. In the face of Ji's unparalleled and violent punch, Feng Qi showed no fear at all. The corners of his lips curled into a smile, and then he punched out. A similarly swift and fierce fist shadow appeared. Bang! In the next moment, the two fist shadows collided. It was like metal colliding with stone. There was a muffled sound. Immediately, Feng Qi and Ji Wu Shuang retreated at the same time. Then, they stabilized themselves at the same time. Neither of them was injured. When Nie Tian saw the scene before him, he could not help but tremble. The way he looked at Feng Qi changed slightly. He had not expected that Feng Qi and Ji Wu Shuang would be equally matched in terms of the strength of their martial bodies. It was known that Ji Wu Shuang was a martial artist with a dual meridian martial body. The strength of his martial body was no weaker than Nie Tian's. Even if Nie Tian and Ji Wu Shuang were to compete in terms of the strength of their martial bodies, the result would probably be the same. It seemed that Feng Qi's strength far exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. Big guy, your strength is really strong. Feng Qi, am convinced. At that moment, Feng Qi smiled faintly. Then, he looked at Nie Tian and said, Brother, can we talk now? Nie Tian frowned slightly. His expression was somewhat ugly. He was not a person who went back on his word. However, he was pressed for time and did not have the time to continue playing with Feng Qi. However, at that moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out in Nie Tian's mind. Nie Tian, agree to his conditions and join number one under heaven. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. It took him a long time to react. How could he have expected that Fat Cat would actually let him join number one under heaven? It was undeniable that Feng Qi was very strong. However, the title of number one under heaven was too arrogant. It was so arrogant that it was a little silly. Brother, you are a swordsman with a sense of justice. You won't go back on your words, right? At that moment, Feng Qi's voice rang out again. He said half-jokingly. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He was surprised once again. He did not reveal his sword intent, but Feng Qi could tell that he was a swordsman. This meant that this guy's perception was very strong. All right, I will join number one under heaven. Nie Tian thought for a moment. He no longer hesitated and said directly, since Fat Cat let him join, there must be a reason. Very good. Feng Qi laughed and said, I announce that from now on, you are the deputy commander of number one under heaven. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. He did not say much. Brother, how should I address you? Then, Feng Qi walked over and asked very enthusiastically, My name is Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded and then introduced Jun Ouching and the others. Feng Qi smiled faintly. He then pulled the little girl over and introduced her to Nie Tian and the others. This little loli is called Qi Xian. She is the image spokesperson that I chose for number one under heaven. Everyone can call her Xian. Nie Tian looked at Feng Qi speechlessly. Little lowly, image spokesperson, he had never heard of these titles. He had no idea what they meant. He really did not know where Feng Qi heard so many strange things. Brother Nie, I knew that you were not an ordinary person at first sight. You are definitely a dragon among men. You are definitely not an ordinary person. If you have time in the future, let's become sworn brothers. Feng Qi was very enthusiastic. He came to Nye Tian's side and said seriously. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He was slightly speechless. At that moment, he suddenly noticed something. His expression changed slightly. He exclaimed in his heart, "In Chi." Chapter 2563. The ominous coffin has appeared. The In Chi is coming from him. Nye Tian looked at the middle-aged man in gray. His eyes narrowed, and he could not help but feel nervous. "Uncle." At practically the same time, Yi Chun cried out in alarm. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Yi Chun. He followed Yi Chun's gaze and locked onto the man in gray. He did not think that this man in gray was Yi Chun's uncle, Yi Tian. "I finally found you." Nye Tian stared at Yi Tian. His lips curled up in a cold smile as he said in a cold voice, "I finally found you. Uncle, save me." Just at this moment, Yi Chun suddenly screamed for help. "You're seeking death." Yu Qingqi was right beside Yi Chun. He reacted quickly and sent out a palm strike with a low growl. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. Yi Chun was caught off guard and turned into a pool of blood. He died on the spot. Nye Tian was stunned and glared at Yu Qingqi. Yu Qingqi had an innocent look on his face. His expression seemed to be saying, "You told me to kill you if there was anything strange." Chuner. In the next moment, Yi Tian looked over and happened to see Yi Chun killed with one palm strike. He cried out in pain, and a berserk ferocious light appeared in his eyes as he stared at Yu Qingqi. "Lord Nye Tian, save me." Yu Qingqi was so scared that his face turned pale and he screamed. Nye Tian took a step forward and the sword aura around his body surged. He stared at Yi Tian and said cold, "If you want revenge, come at me." Yi Tian saw his nephew die with his own eyes. One could imagine the pain in his heart. His aura was wild, and he was like a wild beast that was about to go crazy. "Brat, pay for my nephew's life." In the next moment, Yi Tian let out a roar. His body moved in an instant, and a palm violently blasted down. The violent palm force condensed into a mountain-like palm shadow and blasted down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian narrowed his eyes. After that, he slashed out with the starlight heavenly slash. The sword image was like a dragon breaking through the abyss, whistling through the air and sweeping up the dust. Boom! In the blink of an eye, palm shadows and sword shadows collided in the air. Streams of terrifying energy surged out, causing the surrounding martial arena to shake. Nye Tian and Yi Tian soared into the sky at the same time, like two mountains standing tall in the sky. Below them, the six warriors stared at Yu Qingqi and the others with cold, killing intent, ready to make a move. They were all subordinates that Yi Tian had just recruited. They wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to make contributions and perform well in front of Yi Tian. All six of them were peak paramount gods, and all of them were incredibly powerful. Yu Qingqi was a bit timid, and couldn't help but stand next to Yu Ji and Wu Shuang. However, Feng Qi took a step forward, chuckled, and said, "Gentlemen, impulsiveness is the devil. Don't do anything rash. We're all civilized people, so why do we have to fight and kill each other? The way I see it, there's nothing that can't be settled at the negotiating table. You, cut the crap. You're looking to die." Before Feng Qi could finish, the six warriors roared and attacked Feng Qi. Boom, boom, boom. Waves of violent energy blasted over, causing the void to tremble incessantly. Feng Qi stood where he was without fear. He raised his hand, and a silver spear appeared in his hand. He thrust the spear forward, creating a huge snowstorm. Like a wild beast, he pounced forward ferociously. Bam! 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 In the next moment, a series of muffled sounds rang out, and the six warriors were sent flying backward, drawing arcs in the air before smashing into the ground. Hiss! Everyone gasped in unison when they saw this scene, and their expressions were filled with extreme horror. They couldn't imagine how Feng Qi could be so strong that he could send six peak paramount gods flying with a single thrust of a spear. How could this kid be so strong? Yu Qingqi said, looking at Feng Qi in a daze. When Feng Qi and Wu Shuang's fists collided, Yu Qingqi had assumed that Wu Shuang had held back, which was why Feng Qi hadn't been injured. Only now did he realize that Feng Qi's strength was definitely not inferior to Yu Ji and Wu Xuan. Feng Qi's spear fell, and he put away the silver-white spear in his hand. He smiled faintly and said, "I told you not to be impulsive. Why did you do this?" Jun Aoqing looked at Feng Qi with a frown. Feng Qi's battle prowess is so strong, she thought. He's definitely on the same level as a half-peak expert. Rumble. At the same time, an explosive sound came from high up in the sky. Amidst the endless waves, two figures retreated at the same time and then stood in the sky at the same time. "I'm going to kill you today, you stinking brat," Yi Tian roared. Inwardly, he was shocked. Nie Tian was clearly only a late paramount god, so how could he possibly fight a half-peak paramount god like him to a standstill? Nie Tian smiled coolly. "If you got what it takes, then come at me. Are you looking to die?" Yi Tian roared madly, and the aura around his body rose to the extreme. Waves of violent energy surged in the sky, forming a huge black beast. Roar! In the next moment, he thrust his palm out, and the black behemoth howled as it shot toward Nietan. "Nietan, be careful." Seeing this scene, Jun Aoqing's beautiful eyes trembled, and she cried out. At this moment, Feng Qi also opened his mouth wide, clearly worried about Nietan. Star-severing mortal sword. However, Nietan wasn't afraid in the slightest. He slashed out with his sword, which whistled through the air like a dragon. Rumble. The black behemoth and the sword slammed into each other, causing a deafening boom to echo out. Shockwaves spread out for tens of thousands of meters in all directions. In the blink of an eye, Nie Tian and Yi Tian were engulfed by the shockwaves. The crowd looked up at the scene in the sky, their eyes trembling. A moment later, the shockwaves dissipated and two figures appeared. They were none other than Nie Tian and Yi Tian. But right now, the two figures were in completely different states. Nie Tian floated high up in the sky, his silver hair fluttering in the wind like a huge, incomparably sharp sword. He was wreathed in a fierce sword intent. Yi Tian was trembling, his body covered in blood, and he looked like he could fall at any moment. When the crowd saw the two figures clearly, they felt a chill run down their spines. The shock in their hearts was clearly written on their faces. Who would have thought that a late-stage paramount god would be able to injure a peak half-step paramount god? Incredible. Feng Qi's eyes flickered as he stared at Nie Tian's back. This guy is so tough. He's even stronger than me. At this time, Nie Tian looked at Yi Tian and said with a cold smile, "You want to take revenge with such strength? Is that so?" Yi Tian wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he smiled coldly. "Look behind you, kid." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He suddenly felt an extremely cold aura coming from behind him. He couldn't help but shiver. Following this, he suddenly turned around. The scene that greeted his eyes caused him to be stunned and extremely shocked. 4 black coffins appeared in the air. They were like giant fish swimming in the water, slowly approaching. The atmosphere in the surrounding space instantly became cold, strange, terrifying, and gloomy. Ghoul 13 coffins. Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw the 4 black coffins, and his expression changed. Mu Honglu had told him about the Ghoul 13 coffins. They were all people who used coffins as weapons. It was very strange. The 4 black coffins in front of him were obviously controlled by someone. Chapter 2564. Chains of human bones. Nie Tian stared at the 4 black coffins in front of him and sensed the gloomy aura emitting from the coffins, causing his eyes to tremble. He had heard from Mu Honglu that every coffin owner of the Ghoul Corpse 13 coffins was a half-martial Sacred Realm expert. If these 4 black coffins were really the owners of the coffins, he would have no chance against them with his current strength. What are those? The crowd on the dojo also saw the 4 black coffins, causing their eyes to tremble and the fear in their hearts to be displayed on their faces. Everyone knew that the owners of the Ghoul Corpse 13 coffins were cruel and ruthless. They killed people like flies and were extremely bloodthirsty. They were basically fanatics who did not care about human lives. If these were really the owners of the coffins, then everyone on the dojo would be brutally massacred. No one would be spared. At that instant, One of the black coffins suddenly sped up and dashed toward Nietion. At that instant, Nietion could feel the gloomy aura in the air intensifying. It was several times stronger than before, causing him to feel like breathing was being restricted. Wah! Wah! In the next moment, the black coffin suddenly shook, and two black iron chains shot out of it like two sharp arrows. Like two long snakes, they whizzed towards Nietion at an extremely fast speed. Nietion's eyes narrowed when he felt the cold aura coming from the void. He reacted swiftly by summoning a pair of astral soul wings on his back. With a flap of the wings, he instantly retreated a few hundred meters away. However, the black coffin chains had locked onto him and changed their direction to attack him once again. Damn it! Nietion let out a roar in his heart and slashed with the starlight heavenly slash in his hand. A fiery sword shadow appeared and split into two in the air, blasting toward the two chains. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, two muffled sounds echoed out as the two iron chains shattered the sword shadows and shot towards Nietion from an unimaginable angle, leaving two streaks of black light in their wake. Nietion immediately retreated after sensing the danger. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Pooh! Like ghosts, two streaks of black light flashed past Nietion's chest, leaving two horrifying wounds on his chest. In the blink of an eye, Nietion felt an incomparably gloomy chill invading his body. It was like a wild beast attacking his martial body and meridians, causing his body to tremble in an instant. Roar! In the next moment, he reacted. The 9 dragon veins in his body revolved crazily, and a powerful dragon chi burst out. A dragon's roar resounded in his body, forcing out the cold chi in his body. A surprised voice came from the black coffin. Clearly, it did not expect Nietion to be able to force the yin chi out. When the crowd saw the scene in the sky, their eyes were filled with shock. Who would have thought that a metal chain would appear from the black coffin, and a human voice would be heard? So lock. In the next moment, another eerie voice came from the black coffin. Following that, 2 metal chains shot toward Nietion like wild snakes. Nietion felt that the surrounding space had become extremely gloomy, and the yin chi was very dense. The yin chi that assaulted his face was suffocating. Die! Following that, he reacted by flapping the wings on his back. Instead of retreating, he charged toward the 2 metal chains. His speed was very fast. His body moved along the metal chains, and he could feel the coldness of the yin chi entering his body. At that moment, he was only a few meters away from the metal chains. He could clearly see the runes on the metal chains. He could see that the black chains were engraved with mysterious black runes. The yin chi was oppressive and cold. These aren't metal chains, they're human bones. In the next moment, Nietion realized what was going on. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed. He could feel that the black chain was not a metal chain at all, but a human bone. It was clearly a spine, God's spine. Then, he remembered what Purple Bamboo Mist had said. He immediately realized that the human bone chains in front of him were the god spine. When Purple Bamboo Mist introduced the 9-bone coffin, she had said that the 9-bone coffin was forged from the bones of 9 pinnacle immortal realm experts. The 9 white bones were the spines of 9 pinnacle immortal realm experts, known as the god spine. The human bone chains that Nietion was looking at right now were the god spine. The only difference was that the god spine was not white, but black. Moreover, the aura that the god spine gave off wasn't very strong. It didn't seem like the aura of a pinnacle immortal realm expert, but an ordinary pinnacle paramount god. Whoosh! Whoosh! While Nietion was still in shock, the god spine in front of him suddenly turned around and coiled around him like a wild snake. Caught off guard, Nietion was tied up by the god spine chains. In the next moment, the 2 god spine chains suddenly contracted, releasing an extremely yin and evil energy that directly entered Nietion's body. Oh no! Feeling that something was wrong, Nietion let out a cry in his heart. The 9 dragon meridians in his body revolved madly, releasing waves of dragon energy. However, he could only temporarily stop the god spine chains from contracting and couldn't escape. Die! At that moment, the other 3 black coffins appeared, and a sinister voice came from them. 6 god spine chains appeared, and like 6 terrifying black snakes, they shot toward Nietion. "Get out of the way!" The crowd below shouted subconsciously when they saw this, their faces filled with fear. But right now, Nietion was restrained by 2 god spine chains and couldn't escape at all. It was impossible for him to dodge the attack of the 6 god spine chains. Bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains go. Just as the 6 god spine chains were about to land on him, Nietion's eyes narrowed, and he let out a furious roar. Then, the 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains shot out from his body. Bang! 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 The terrifying bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains surged out and collided with the god spine chains. Nietion moved slightly, controlling the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains. He grabbed one of the god spine chains and exerted force. Bang! In the next moment, a terrifying muffled sound was heard, and the god spine chain was torn apart. The other god spine chains seemed to feel threatened, and they all retreated, floating in the air like giant snakes. After Nietion broke free, he stood still, and the 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains floated around him, making him look extremely evil, like a god of death. What did that kid release? The crowd stared at Nietion, unable to believe what they were seeing. It was already strange enough that the black coffins released the bone-eroding chains. But Nietion was even stranger than the 4 black coffins. He actually released 9 terrifying soul-shackling chains from his body. What was even more strange was that the aura of the 9 soul-shackling chains was extremely evil. The 4 black coffins felt threatened, and they didn't dare to get close. Nietion also felt the suppression of the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains on the god spine chains, and his lips curled into a sinister smile. Chapter 2565. Chapter 2565. Chapter 2565. Violent Extermination. Who the hell is this kid? Seeing Nietion's strange behavior, Yetion's heart sank and his face turned very unsightly. He never expected Nietion to be able to deal with 4 coffins at the same time. One had to know that the figures in these 4 mysterious coffins were all half-step peak powerhouses. They were extremely terrifying. Yetion's figure retreated slightly. He was prepared to run away if the time was not right. Nietion looked at the 4 black coffins and frowned. He thought to himself, the people in these black coffins are too weak. They shouldn't be from the 13 ghoul corpses. Nietion had no understanding of the 13 ghoul corpses, so he didn't know what rank these 4 black coffins were among the 13 ghoul corpses. "Kid, what are those chains on your body?" At this moment, a deep voice came from one of the black coffins, echoing in the air. It was bone-chilling, making people feel a bone-chilling coldness. Does a dead man need to know so much? Nietion sneered and stepped forward. 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains surged out, burning with chaotic flames and blooming in the air. "Arrogant," the person in the black coffin replied, clearly angry. He originally thought that Nietion was just a small fry, not worthy of his attention. But now he knew that Nietion's strength was enough to pose a fatal threat to him. Die. In the next moment, Nietion moved without hesitation. 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains shot out at the same time, bursting with an earth-shattering aura towards one of the black coffins. The owner of the black coffin felt threatened and immediately released a divine spine chain, which blossomed with a cold light in the air. Crash! But the divine spine chain was smashed into pieces by the 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains. Bang! In the next moment, the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains hit the black coffin. After a muffled sound, the black coffin was smashed through. A shriek was heard as a figure flew out of the black coffin. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at the black figure in shock. It was a man who was as thin as a match. He stood there like a skeleton, covered with a layer of human skin. His face was so terrifying that one could even see the lines of his bones. The strangest thing was that on his body, there were several chains that looked like iron chains dancing wildly, making him look like an octopus. It was extremely frightening. Is this a human? The crowd's voice was trembling. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was hard to imagine that a martial artist could live in such a state. This person must have cultivated some kind of evil cultivation technique, causing his entire martial body to be deformed, turning him into this neither human nor ghost appearance. I'm going to kill you. In the next moment, the eerie figure suddenly let out a mournful howl. Then, it moved and rushed towards Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. The star heavenly slash in his hand directly slashed down. The sharp sword intent whistled through the air, and the sword light blossomed in the void, drawing a dazzling arc crash. Before the eerie figure could react, the sword shadow fell from the sky and engulfed him. The black coffin cultivator died on the spot. The scene in the sky caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Who would have thought that a late-stage paramount god would have such terrifying strength? Such a strange black coffin cultivator with such a sinister aura had actually died at the hands of Nietion. At that moment, Yetion let out a low growl, and his figure flickered as he retreated 1,000 meters. Clearly, he was preparing to escape. Feng Qi, stop this guy, Nietion shouted. Don't worry, leave this old fox to me. Hearing Nietion's voice, Feng Qi chuckled. His figure flickered, and spear shadows flickered around him. He shot towards Yetion like an arrow released from a bow. Nietion nodded slightly, no longer worrying about anything else. He knew how strong Feng Qi was. He was more than enough to deal with a heavily injured Yetion. Stinking brat, who the hell are you? The death of a black coffin cultivator caused the other 3 black coffins to fall silent for a moment. Then, a questioning voice came from one of the black coffins. The person who killed you. Nietion smiled coldly, and his eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. Since these 4 black coffins had come looking for him, there was no way he would let them leave alive. Brat, do you know who we are? A threatening voice came from one of the black coffins. If I'm not wrong, your coffin should be the 9-bone coffin, Nietion said with a cold smile. Nietion had never seen the 9-bone coffin before, but from Purple Bamboo Mist and Mu Honglio's words, he guessed that these coffins were very similar to the 9-bone coffin. However, the strength of these black coffin cultivators was clearly not very strong. Apart from being a little strange, they were only equivalent to half-step peak martialists. With Nietion's battle strength, he could already fight against a half-step peak martialist. Furthermore, his bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains had an extremely strong suppressive effect on the divine spine chains of the black coffins. This made it very easy for him to kill the black coffin cultivators. When the 3 black coffins heard Nietion's words, they simultaneously exclaimed in shock. They had not expected that Nietion would actually know that their coffins were the 9-bone coffins. In the next moment, the owners of the 3 black coffins seemed to have thought of something and simultaneously shouted, Stinking brat, you're from the 10,000 Domains Guild? I'm not from the 10,000 Domains Guild. Nietion coldly smiled and directly said, Are you done with your nonsense? If you are, it's time for you to die. Arrogant. The 3 black coffins roared angrily at the same time. Immediately after, they actually moved and connected their heads and tails together. Immediately, the qi in the air became even thicker, to the point where it was almost suffocating. When Nietion saw this scene, he coldly laughed and said, Lining up to die? Immediately after, the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains around his body surged and covered the sky. In midair, they formed a huge soul-shackling chain and violently attacked. Boom! Under the impact of the soul-shackling chains, the qi in the air directly split apart like turbid waves. Bang! 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 In the next instant, the soul-shackling chains descended. In the air, 3 muffled sounds could be heard. The 3 black coffins were directly pierced. Break! Nietion growled. With a thought, the huge soul-shackling chain split into 9. The 3 black coffins directly collapsed into pieces, turning into endless qi that pervaded the air. 3 eerie figures appeared in front of everyone's eyes. They were exactly the same as the eerie figure from before. Die! Just as the 3 eerie figures had not stabilized themselves, Nietion's explosive shout had already sounded. Shwa! Shwa! In the next moment, 3 sword rays appeared in the air. They descended from the sky and directly killed the 3 eerie figures. Chapter 2566. The Coffin of Extreme. After killing the 4 black coffin warriors, Nietion retracted the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains and his sword will, and his expression returned to normal. The crowd below stared at him, their expressions filled with extreme shock and disbelief. Shock and fear could not be concealed at all. Holy shit, you killed all 4 owners of the profound coffins. Feng Qi arrived at that moment, holding Yi Tian in one hand and staring at Nietion in shock. He had assumed that Nietion would need his help to kill the 4 profound coffin lords. Who could have guessed that Nietion would be so powerful as to kill all 4 of them in such a short time? With a faint smile, Nietion said, "You're pretty impressive for capturing this guy." Then, he blurred into action and landed on the ground. When everyone saw him land, they all swarmed up and surrounded him. "Sir, please join the Black Panther Corps. You could be the captain." Sir, please join the 1,000 Cloud-Shattering Corps. You could be anything you want." "Sir, you must have your own corps, right? Please let me join." After witnessing Nietion's heaven-defying battle prowess, the crowd seemed to have gone crazy. They either invited Nietion to join their own corps or wanted to join Nietion's. Standing in place, Nietion's body shook violently, and a violent sword aura shot up into the sky, forcing everyone back. Boom! He had already joined the number 1 corps under heaven, so of course he wouldn't join anyone else. As for whether or not the number 1 corps under heaven wanted to recruit new members, that was Feng Qi's business. At that moment, Feng Qi walked over and said with a faint smile, "Nietion, let's get out of here." Nietion nodded, then left. Zhang Ziao, the recruiter of the Greyhawk Corps, looked at Nietion's departing figure, his entire back drenched in sweat. Not too long ago, he had ridiculed Nietion for being a piece of trash who was only a late paramount god. Who would have thought that this trash would kill 4 half-step peak powerhouses in front of so many people? If Zhang Ziao had known that Nietion had such terrifying fighting strength, even if he had to kneel and roll on the ground, he would have recruited Nietion into the Great Eagle Army. But now it was all too late. After Nietion, Feng Qi, and the others left the shady martial arena, they directly brought Yi Tian to an empty wilderness. After sensing the surroundings with his divine sense and confirming that there was no one around, Nietion locked his eyes on Yi Tian. Without any nonsense, he directly said, "Hand it over." Hand over what? Yi Tian was stunned for a moment, and his body involuntarily stepped back. "I heard from Yi Tian that you have a box in your hands. Take it out." Nie Tianling smiled coldly, his eyes filled with murderous intent. "I." Yi Tian's eyes trembled, and his face paled. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. "You don't want to hand it over?" Nie Tianling laughed, and his killing intent enveloped Yi Tian like a corporeal entity. At this time, as long as he willed it, he could directly kill Yi Tian. I'll take it right away." Yi Tian was so scared that his body was trembling. As he spoke, he took out a black box with trembling hands. The moment the black box appeared, an extremely ferocious qi was released, instantly enveloping the space within a few thousand meters. Ugh! Qi Xin, the girl next to Feng Qi, coughed up a mouthful of blood. "Little Xin, are you all right?" Feng Qi quickly released his energy to protect Qi Xin. Qi Xin breathed a sigh of relief, but her face was still deathly pale. Nie Tian's brows furrowed, and his expression darkened. He had never imagined that the palm-sized box would be filled with so much energy. Even with his strength, he found it hard to breathe when he looked at the box from such a close distance. The black box was not big and could be held in one palm. However, its shape was a little strange. Looking closely, it looked like a small coffin. "What is this?" Nyetion became cold, and he looked at Etion and asked coldly. Etion's eyes trembled, and he stammered, not daring to speak. "This is the coffin of extreme een." At this moment, Feng Qi stepped forward, and his expression was no longer as relaxed as before. Instead, it was very serious. "Coffin of extreme een? What's that?" Nyetion was stunned, and he looked at Feng Qi and asked. "A coffin used to hold the infant of extreme een." Feng Qi nodded, and his eyes were filled with restrained anger. "Infant of extreme een?" Nyetion was stunned, and then he remembered what Purple Bamboo Mist had said. The so-called infant of extreme een was a baby that was born in an een year, an een month, and an een hour. The function of the infant of extreme een was to extract the dragon's bone and blood and refine thousands of babies into coffins. Thinking of this, Nyetion's eyes trembled, and he said in a low voice, "Are all the infants of extreme een in the coffin of extreme een?" "Yes." Feng Qi nodded. "Open it." Nyetion's eyes narrowed, and he roared. The coffin of extreme een was obviously something similar to a space ring. Who knew how many infants of extreme een were inside? Those infants of extreme een were all babies that were less than 100 days old. Yition was so scared by Nyetion's roar that his face turned pale, and he could not speak. "Open it." Nyetion stepped forward, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He stared at Yition and said word by word. Yition nodded in fear, and he quickly opened the coffin of extreme een. The moment the coffin of extreme een was opened, babies appeared one after another, and they landed neatly on the ground. Nyetion looked at the scene in front of him, and he was completely stunned. Those babies were spread all over the ground, and at a glance, he could not tell how many there were. Moreover, the bodies of these babies had lost all signs of life, and it was obvious that they had been dead for a long time. "Bastard!" In an instant, Nyetion roared like a wild beast, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was extremely angry. With so many babies being killed, any normal person would be so angry that they would lose control. The others were also shocked, and looking at the scene in front of them, they did not know what to do. Yition looked at Nyetion's frenzied look, and his face turned green with fear. He felt as if his throat was stuffed with cow dung. After a full 10 seconds, Nyetion opened his mouth, and he suddenly turned around and asked Yition, "How many infants of extreme een are there?" "One, 10,000. Yition's teeth were chattering, and it took him a long time to say it. He waved his hand and said, "This is none of my business. I was just following the order of the ghoul 13 coffins to transport the coffin of extreme een. You deserve to die." Before he finished speaking, Nyetion suddenly stepped forward, and a big hand suddenly grabbed down and covered Yition's skull fiercely. Bang! In the next moment, he suddenly exerted force, and Yition's skull was directly crushed by him, and his brain and blood were crushed together. Yition's body shook a little, and he fell to the ground powerlessly. His death was extremely tragic. However, no matter how he died, he could not make up for the sins he had committed. Chapter 25:67. Heaven and Earth in the Vast Wilderness. Nyetion's heart ached as he looked at the 10,000 extreme een infants on the ground. He already knew that this was a cruel world, but facing the scene before him, he still could not bear it. He had killed many people on his path to becoming an expert, but he knew that even if the people he had killed were not evil, they were definitely not good people. Even if his heart was as hard as iron, he still couldn't bring himself to kill a baby who was less than 100 days old. How cruel were people like Yition? How could they kill so many babies? Words like heartless and cruel and unscrupulous were almost a form of flattery when used on Yition and the others. Nyetion. After a while, Jun Aoqing walked over and called out softly, "I'm fine." Nyetion let out a deep breath, his raging heart finally calming down a bit. "Little brother." However, right at this moment, a wailing voice suddenly sounded. Nyetion was stunned. He turned around and saw that the person crying was Chi Xian. Then, Chi Xian actually ran over and checked the infant of extreme Yin one by one. What's wrong with her? Nie Tian looked at Chi Xian and asked Feng Qi in confusion. At this moment, Feng Qi's expression was also very unsightly. He sighed and said, Chi Xian's younger brother went missing a few days ago. He might be an extreme Yin infant. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he froze on the spot. Feng Qi frowned and said, Chi Xian heard that her brother was captured by the Ghoul 13 coffins, so she came to the Shady Mountain alone. I met her on the way, so I brought her with me. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He did not expect Chi Xian to have such a story. No wonder a 15 or 16-year-old girl would come to the Shadow Mountain alone. Chi Xian checked the extreme Yin infants one by one. Everyone watched from the side with their hearts bleeding. Half a day later, Chi Xian walked over and shook his head. She didn't find her brother, which was good news for her. Her emotions had stabilized a lot. She stood there silently with her head lowered. At that moment, Feng Qi turned to Nie Tian and asked in a grim voice, Nie Tian, what do we do with these extreme Yin souls? Nie Tian's expression turned gloomy for a long time. In the end, he decided to incinerate all the extreme Yin infants, hoping that they could obtain peace after death. A moment later, Nie Tian and the rest finished dealing with all the extreme Yin infants. Then, they left the wilderness and headed for Shadow City. Along the way, Feng Qi walked beside Nie Tian and suddenly said, Nie Tian, your strength is truly formidable. You were actually able to easily kill 4 mysterious coffin masters. Mysterious coffin master? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He asked with a puzzled expression, are the cultivators in the 4 black coffins the owners of the mysterious coffin? That's right. Feng Qi nodded. The 13 ghoul coffins all use coffins as weapons. Their coffins are divided into 4 levels: heaven, earth, profound, and yellow. The strongest are the sky coffin, and the weakest are the yellow coffin. Because there are only 13 sky coffin masters, they're called the 13 ghoul coffins. Among the 13 ghoul coffin masters, sky coffin master is a half-step saint, earth coffin master is a peak god, profound coffin master is a half-step paramount god, and yellow coffin master is a peak paramount god. The 4 black coffins that attacked you earlier were the 4 mysterious coffin masters. Their strengths were all at the peak of the half-step. Nie Tian nodded and looked at Feng Qi with a strange expression. So that's how it is. He had been wondering why the owners of the 4 black coffins were so weak. They weren't as strong as Mu Honglu had described them to be. As it turned out, Mu Honglio's opponent was Lord Sky Coffin, while Nie Tian's opponent was Lord Profound Coffin. However, the fact that Nie Tian could kill 4 Profound Coffin Masters in one go was already shocking. Why did the 4 Profound Coffin Masters suddenly appear? Nie Tian became cold and asked. They should be patrolling Profound Coffin Masters. The corner of Feng Qi's mouth twitched. After all, this area is under the jurisdiction of the 13 ghoul coffins. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. His eyes flickered as he asked, why did you enter the Shadow Mountain, Feng Qi? Feng Qi looked at Nie Tian and smiled. I know you're suspicious of me, Nie Tian. Why do I know so much about the 13 ghoul coffins? Yeah. Seeing that Feng Qi had made it clear, Nie Tian didn't hide anything. He was indeed suspicious of Feng Qi because the latter knew too much. First, he recognized the extreme Yin coffin. Then he mentioned the heaven, earth, mystic, and yellow coffin masters. The 13 ghoul coffins was a secretive organization. How could Feng Qi know so much at such a young age? You're right to suspect me. It would be strange if I didn't. Feng Qi was very calm. However, there are some things that I can't tell you. I naturally have my own reasons for entering the Shadow Mountain. However, I can assure you that I'm not your enemy. You can trust me at the most crucial moment. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as he stared into Feng Qi's eyes, trying to find a trace of hesitation in them. However, Feng Qi's gaze was firm and calm. Nie Tian nodded and didn't say anything else. Feng Qi smiled and asked, Nie Tian, I haven't asked you yet. Why did you come to the Shadow Mountain? I'm looking for something. Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. Since Feng Qi had hidden some things from him, of course, he would not be honest with him. It's fine. No matter what you're looking for, since we're brothers in the same army, I'll definitely help you find it. Feng Qi wasn't angry and said with a faint smile, "Thank you." Nyetian also smiled. Next, after Nyetian and the others entered the Shadow Mountain, they didn't stop and went straight into the real Shadow Mountain. Yu Qingqi frowned and whispered to Nyetian, "Lord Nyetian, the Yin energy here is very heavy. It's much stronger than outside." Nyetian nodded and couldn't help but look at Xian. This little girl only had the strength of the Origin Spirit Realm. It was obvious that she couldn't withstand such heavy Yin energy and was relying on Feng Qi to protect her. The most troublesome thing was that she had to find her younger brother. Yi Tian and the others were obviously just small fries, helping the Ghoul Corp's 13 coffins transport the extreme Yin infant. Who knew how many people like Yi Tian were specially transporting the extreme Yin infant? Just now, Feng Qi told Nyetian that there were people searching for the extreme Yin infant in various places in the frozen ruins. After killing them, they would be sent to the Shadow Mountain. It was hard to imagine how many innocent babies were killed by the Ghoul Corp's 13 coffins in order to refine thousands of babies. Xian's younger brother disappeared a few days ago and was currently unknown. Finding him was like looking for a needle in a haystack. However, Xian was very firm. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come to the Shadow Mountain alone. It had to be said that she was very lucky to meet Feng Qi and Nyetian. At this time, Feng Qi suddenly came to Nyetian's side and asked in a low voice, "Nyetian, do you have a clear destination for entering the Shadow Mountain?" Nyetian shook his head. He came to find the 10,000 with Spirit Heart, but he didn't know where to find it and how to find it. The Shadow Mountain was very big. If he searched aimlessly, he didn't know how long it would take. "Why don't we go straight to the nest of the Ghoul Corp's 13 coffins?" Feng Qi smiled strangely and said in a low voice, "The nest of the Ghoul Corp's 13 coffins?" Nyetian was stunned for a moment, his face full of doubt. Chapter 2568. Bat Monster, the Ghost City of Fengdu. Nyetian stared at the map in Feng Qi's hand. His eyes suddenly narrowed, and his face was filled with astonishment. He didn't expect that Feng Qi actually had a map of the Shady Mountain. Feng Qi didn't explain too much, but smiled faintly and said, "We have just entered the Shady Mountain, and Fengdu Ghost City is in the core hinterland of the Shady Mountain. Rumor has it that the 13 Sky Coffin Lords are in Fengdu Ghost City." Nyetian heard Feng Qi's words and couldn't help but ask, "What do you want to do in Fengdu Ghost City?" Fengdu Ghost City was the lair of the 13 Sky Coffin Lords, and the 13 Sky Coffin Lords were all in the Ghost City. Without exaggeration, Fengdu Ghost City was definitely the most dangerous place in the Shady Mountain. Not to mention the 13 Sky Coffin Lords. Even if they encountered a powerhouse of the Earth Coffin Lord level, Nyetian and the others wouldn't be able to deal with it. If they were unlucky and encountered a Sky Coffin Lord, Nyetian and the others would only be killed in seconds. Feng Qi must have a plan to go to such a dangerous place. "Steal something." Feng Qi looked at Nyetian and said with a smile, "Steal something?" Nyetian was stunned for a moment and had a speechless expression. What was so important that Feng Qi would risk his life to steal it? "Nyetian, how about it? Do you want to go?" Feng Qi looked at Nyetian with a burning gaze, obviously hoping that the latter would agree. "Okay, go." Nyetian thought for a moment and didn't hesitate much, directly nodding his head and saying, "Purple Bamboo Wolf 7 said that the 10,000 with Spirit Heart was stolen by the 9-bone Yin coffin and the ominous coffin of thousands of babies. These two people were obviously at the Sky Coffin Lord level. If he wanted to find the 10,000 with Spirit Heart, he must find these two Sky Coffin Lords." Even though he knew that these two Sky Coffin Lords were half-step saints, Nyetian still had to find them. "Good, as expected of a brother that I, Feng Qi, have taken a liking to." Seeing that Nyetian had agreed, Feng Qi chuckled, feeling very proud. Nyetian was speechless, but he did not say anything. Then, Nyetian let Xian enter the 9 Superbs. Nyetian would take care of her inside, so she would be fine. Next, Tian and the others began to head towards Fengdu Ghost City. The shady mountain was fraught with danger, and terrifying killing intent was lurking everywhere. Half a day later, Tian and the others arrived outside a valley. Just as they were about to leave, they heard a shrill cry coming from the valley. It was incomparably mournful. Yu Qingqi was quite frightened. He looked at Tian and said, What is that sound? Tian frowned and thought for a moment. Then, his figure moved and he flew toward the valley. I'll help. At this time, a miserable cry for help came from the valley. Then a figure rushed out. His whole body was covered with blood, and both of his arms were broken. Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the person. He actually knew him. It was Zhang Ziao of the Grey Eagle Corps, who wanted to recruit him in the martial arts arena. My lord, help! Zhang Ziao obviously recognized Tian as well. As if he had seen a life-saving straw, he shouted at the top of his lungs. Tian did not hesitate. He moved and directly flew over. Roar! At this time, a sinister sound came from the valley. Then, a black figure burst out and attacked Tian. Star fire burning sea. Tian did not even look at it. He directly brandished his sword, and the flaming sword shadow rushed over like a sea of fire. Boom! The flaming sword shadow fell and instantly engulfed the black figure, directly burning it to ashes. Tian steadied himself and looked into the valley. His face could not help but change. He felt an extremely evil aura coming from the valley. The evil aura was extremely terrifying. It was as if it could seep into the bones of people, and it could not help but make people tremble in fear. The black figure just now came too quickly. Tian did not even have time to see clearly what it was. He felt very strange. At this moment, he felt the evil aura again, and he could not help but feel afraid. If it was any other time, he would definitely enter the valley to see what exactly was there. But now, he was in a hurry and did not have time. At this time, Tian turned to look behind him. Zhang Ziao had long disappeared. Forget it. I'll leave. After thinking for a while, Tian finally decided to leave. His figure moved and was ready to leave. Roar! But at this moment, a shrill cry came from the valley again. Then, a black figure appeared and descended like a ghost. Tian frowned, but he did not attack. Instead, a pair of wings appeared behind his back, and his figure suddenly retreated. Although his speed was very fast, he was still a step too slow. The black figure flew past him and left a wound on his chest. Tian did not care. He steadied himself and fixed his eyes on the black figure. At this time, he finally saw the face of the black figure clearly. He could not help but be stunned. The appearance of the black figure was extremely strange. Its body was pitch black, and there were black wings on its back. They were not condensed wings, but real wings made of flesh and blood. The strangest thing was its face. It looked 70% human and 30% bird. At first glance, this monster looked like a giant bat about 5 to 6 meters long. But if one looked closely, it looked like a human who had cultivated evil skills and became like this. Tian had seen the scaled demon martial artist in the dark sea dark prison before. Therefore, he was still calm when he saw this strange-looking guy again. Damn, what kind of monster is this? Is that Batman? At this moment, Feng Qi's figure appeared. When he saw the bat monster, he cried out in shock. Tian frowned and glanced at Feng Qi. He did not know what the latter was talking about. Ow! The next moment, the bat monster suddenly howled and rushed directly towards Feng Qi Bang. Feng Qi didn't even bother to look at it. He directly punched out. With a muffled sound, the bat monster was sent flying and smashed heavily into a huge boulder beside him. After landing on the ground, it flopped a few times and then stopped moving. I don't care if you're Batman or Spider-Man. If you dare to provoke me, you will die. Feng Qi glanced at the bat monster and said with a sneer. Tian did not care about Feng Qi instead. He looked at the valley in front of him. Tian, what is in the valley? Feng Qi felt the gloomy aura coming from the valley. He flashed to Tian's side and asked with a puzzled look. Tian shook his head and said, Let's leave. Feng Qi nodded and did not want to stay any longer. But just as the two of them turned around and were about to leave, a low and cold voice came from the valley. "Since you are here, why are you in such a hurry to leave?" The voice was low and murderous. It sounded from the valley, revealing an extremely cold chill. Nietion frowned, and his heart sank. He did not expect that there would be someone in the valley. Nietion and Feng Qi looked at each other. They were very cautious and did not dare to act rashly. "Since you are not willing to come in, I have to invite you in." Then, a low voice came from the valley again. The next moment, a terrible scene happened. For black coffins suddenly flew out of the valley. They were very fast and directly surrounded Nietion and Feng Qi. Nietion's pupils shrank slightly. He looked at the black coffins around him, and his face suddenly sank.